Chapter 41-44. This time, Xian had used a large amount of top-notch cultivation resources to take advantage of the return of the devouring treasured body clone. He had consumed a vial of level 19 liquid in an attempt to break through to the universe grade. In the end, after a few hours of tempering and cleansing of his spirit and body, he had finally succeeded in breaking through to the universe grade. Currently, his original body was a universe grade 1 grade under normal circumstances. His cultivation method and physical body were synchronized, and he cultivated both magic and martial arts. Once he activated the ancient demon ape bloodline and entered the three-headed, six-armed demon ape true body state, he would be able to use the fifth transformation of the 9 demon ape transformations bloodline ability. His cultivation base would soar to the universe grade 7 grade in one fell swoop. He would only be 3 grades away from becoming an immortal grade old freak. Xian was already satisfied with such a great harvest in a short period of time. However, what surprised him was that the fortune this time was far from over. As Xian opened his eyes and was about to get up in excitement, a familiar system notification sounded in his mind once again. Ding! Congratulations to the host. The level of the demon core has increased. Current level 9. Level 9? This breakthrough had actually caused the mind source core in his sea of consciousness to also transform and evolve. Xian felt even more delighted as this thought flashed through his mind. In retrospect, the mind source core in his sea of consciousness seemed to have transformed and evolved into a level 8 source core a long time ago. However, there had been no activity after that, and there had never been any signs of it transforming and evolving into a level 9 source core. However, this time, he had been completely unprepared. Everything had happened naturally and inexplicably. This made him speechless. As his heart surged, he suppressed the thought of immediately getting up and ending this breakthrough. Instead, he continued to sit in a lotus position at the mouth of the farmer god cauldron, which was shrouded in a dense 9-colored fog. He returned to his inner state, and his consciousness entered his sea of consciousness. Previously, there had been a total of 9 objects suspended above Xian's sea of consciousness. In the middle were the Rai-D seal and the farmer god cauldron. Surrounding the Rai-D seal and the farmer god cauldron were 7 small objects: the mind source core, the void essence crystal, the fallen sky bow, the black gold dragon scale, the underworld claw, the small immemorial devil ape, and a simple tortoise shell that had just entered. Now that the devouring body clone had returned, there was another object suspended above his sea of consciousness. It was the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda that had been given to the devouring body clone to take away. A total of 10 treasures formed 2 different rings in the air above his sea of awareness. Of his sea of his consciousness, the ancient desolate dragon cauldron and the pagoda. Of the inheritance of the pagoda of the 3 treasures. Of the ancient of 3 treasures of treasures. And on the edge of his sea of consciousness, there were still 7 treasures, which represented Xian's various top bloodlines and skills. Apart from the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda, Xian had also given the devouring treasured void ladle, which was a first-level Star Lord, as well as the phantom of a desolate dragon, which had been of great help to Xian in the early stages of his growth. In addition, there was also the weeping soul bloodhorn, which had been of great help to him during the early stages of his growth. For some reason, all 3 of them had been stored in the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda. Of course, although the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda was a relic of the era, like the farmer god cauldron and the underworld cauldron, Xian had completely refined it. Because of his cultivation level, he couldn't fully utilize the full power of the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda. However, the treasures and battle pets stored in the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda could be summoned or used at any time. Xian probed the ancient desolate inheritance pagoda with his consciousness and soon found something. The weeping soul bloodhorn was still the same as before. However, even though Xian was now an old monster of the universe, and his cultivation was far from what it used to be. When he saw the Weeping Soul Bloodhorn again, he still had a feeling that he was unable to contend against it. The Weeping Soul Blood Ape was a supreme of the Desolate era on the same level as the Void Tortoise, the Golden Dragon, and the Desolate Xianxia. The Weeping Soul Bloodhorn it left behind was obviously not simple. If nothing unexpected happened, it could probably be used by Xian until he became a supreme of the Desolate era. As for the true body that Xian had personally reconstructed, the Void Ladle, who was previously only at the Star Lord level, had actually grown to the immortal realm. This caused Xian to be rather shocked. It was no wonder that the devouring doppelganger could do so well in the 10 Ultimates Celestial Palace of the Human Cultivation Camp alone. The former even sent out an immortal state monster, but still failed to capture him. Presumably, the Void Ladle, whose strength had been restored to the immortal state, must have contributed a lot at some critical juncture. As for the demonic dragon, which was just a wisp of Xian's soul and had not been able to reform its true form in the present world, it originally had the strength of a supreme of the Desolate era. However, because it was just a wisp of Xian's soul, its strength was greatly weakened every time it attacked. In the end, it was destined to vanish into thin air. However, the devouring doppelganger sent it into the ancient Desolate Inheritance Pagoda before the energy of the wisp of Xian's soul was exhausted. After being replenished by the energy accumulated in the ancient Desolate Inheritance Pagoda, it was full of energy again. After scanning the ancient Desolate Inheritance Pagoda with his soul, Xian quickly retreated and turned to the Mind Source Core, which was hovering among the 7 small objects in the periphery of his mind. After this transformation, the Mind Source Core, which had evolved to a level 9 Mind Source Core, had become smaller in size. It was now only the size of a thumb, and its entire body was purple gold. Its color was incomparably deep, as if there was a purple-gold vortex inside that could suck in one's mind. There was no doubt that the Mind Source Core had transformed once again. The demon's mind power contained within it had changed from a level 8 mind power to a level 9 mind power. After this transformation, Xian's power would definitely increase greatly when he activated the demon core's mind power techniques, secret techniques, and mystic abilities. Furthermore, following this transformation of the Mind Source Core, all the mind power techniques, secret techniques, and mystic abilities that Xian had mastered had also leveled up accordingly. The offensive mind power secret techniques, such as the Annihilation Spear and the Annihilation Vortex, as well as the auxiliary mind power secret techniques, such as the Absolute Concussion and the Perfect Concussion, had already been high level, so there had been no changes this time. The Mind Crush and Mind Charm secret techniques were the same. When the Demon Core had transformed to a level 8 Mind Source Core, they had already been high-level secret techniques. As for the Mind Lightning technique and the Mind Reversal technique, they had been mid-level mystic abilities. This time, they had finally leveled up and become high-level mystic abilities. Lastly, there was the Slave Seal technique, which had undergone an unexpected transformation not too long ago. Previously, it had only been an elementary transformation, so it could be used on most non-living things except demons. Of course, ordinary humans and creatures of other races with no cultivation base would still be affected, even if they didn't have a Mind Source Core. Chapter 41-45. The power of the intermediate variant slave imprint had a monumental increase on the basis of the primary variant. Its significance was extraordinary. Besides the demons, the primary variant slave imprint could also be used on most non-living things, including ordinary humans and creatures of other races without any cultivation base. Even if they did not have a Mind Source Core in their heads, they could still be affected by the primary variant slave imprint and be subdued as a slave. As for the intermediate variant slave seal, apart from demons and most non-living beings, it could also subdue non-demon beings with cultivation. It wasn't just limited to ordinary people without cultivation. Of course, the success rate was definitely a problem, and it was related to the user's cultivation. Close. For example, Xian was currently a universe grade. If he used the intermediate variant slave imprint on someone with a cultivation base below the universe grade, he would most likely succeed. However, if the cultivation base of a target was at the immortal grade or even the marquee grade, there is no doubt that the possibility of success would be very low. Perhaps the target would be in an abnormal state, such as being seriously injured and awaiting death. This kind of limitation was reasonable. Although it was a pity, Yixian was not disappointed. At the very least, after the intermediate variant, he would be able to use the slave imprint at a high frequency in the future. Thinking back to everything that had happened after he had entered the Black Mosquito ship, how would Yixian have been able to achieve what he had today if he hadn't obtained the slave imprint? He would have perished long ago when he had been imprisoned in the Black Mosquito ship. Previously, every time the mind source core in Yixian's sea of consciousness transformed and evolved, it would unlock a new mind power skill, secret technique, or mystic ability. The primary variant of his slave imprint had unexpectedly appeared when his source core had evolved to level 8. This time, following the evolution of his level 8 source core into a level 9 source core, Yixian had once again obtained a new mind power mystic ability. At this moment, when he was checking the mental power skills, secret arts, and divine abilities that he had mastered, such as the spiritual lightning skill and the mutated slave seal, the newly obtained information about the mental power divine abilities had been successfully analyzed by the devouring system in his body and stored in the system's data database. There were also some mysterious specks of light floating above Yixian's sea of consciousness that diffused from the grade 9 source core and entered his sea of consciousness. This made Yixian feel as if he had been enlightened. In a short moment, he completely understood the essence of the spiritual power ability he had just obtained. This was a divine ability that was powered by spiritual energy, and it was called the spiritual black hole. When one heard the name of this mystic ability, one could roughly analyze its might. This mystic ability was supported by the level 9 mind power contained within the level 9 source core in Yixian's sea of consciousness. Once it was unleashed, it would form a terrifying black hole-like attack surface in the void outside the body. Compared to Yixian's destructive vortex and other mind power secret techniques, it was many times more powerful. Of course, this would consume a lot of energy. Based on the total amount of mind power stored in the grade 9 source core in Yixian's head, it would only be enough for him to use this technique twice. After using it twice, he would fall into a predicament where his mind power was about to be depleted. He would be in a weak state and have a splitting headache. Therefore, even though he was very much looking forward to using this mystic ability, it could be said that his heart was thumping with excitement. He really wanted to try out its might on the spot and see whether his spiritual black hole mystic ability was stronger or weaker when compared to the great spiritual black hole mystic ability. However, when he considered the fact that it would consume a lot of energy, he forcefully suppressed this impulse in the end. Using it once would deplete half of the grade 9 source core in his sea of consciousness. This was simply too wasteful. Just thinking about it made his heart ache. After calming down, Yixian gradually calmed down from his excitement. After his main consciousness withdrew from his knowledge sea, his eyes opened. A blazing light burst out from the bottom of his eyes. His entire temperament seemed to have gone through another round of rebirth. It was obvious that he was very different from before. This was what it should be like. This breakthrough had not only allowed his strength to break through the bottleneck of the Realm Lord grade, but it had also allowed him to step into the Universe grade and become a Universe monster. The spiritual source core in his sea of consciousness had once again undergone a magnificent transformation and evolved to a grade 9 source core. The various spiritual power techniques, secret techniques, and mystic abilities that he had mastered had also increased in level and power. With so many aspects of evolution and metamorphosis, it was only natural that there would be some changes in his temperament. Whoosh! After standing up, Yixian took a step forward, and his figure had already floated from the mouth of the farmer god cauldron to the void of the universe. Then, with a wave of his hand, the farmer god cauldron was stored in the undying world within his body. At this point, this breakthrough had come to a perfect end. Everything had come to an end. The entire process fell into the eyes of countless Federation citizens and Starry Sky powerhouses. At this moment, when they saw Yi Xian wave his hand and put away the farmer god cauldron, ending this magnificent breakthrough, a wave of exclamations and exclamations came from all over the void. He broke through. He actually succeeded in breaking through again. A few hours ago, he was still at the perfect realm Lord grade 9, but now he's already at the universe grade level 1. Since when did the universe old monster become so worthless? In just a few hours, one was born in front of everyone. This makes people speechless. Comparisons are odious. If it were anyone else, they would need at least thousands of years of accumulation to break through from the perfect realm Lord grade 9 to the universe grade. Here he is, easily breaking through in a few hours. The key is that before this, he had just broken through 6 small grades consecutively. Alright, a few days ago, he broke through several realms in one fell swoop. Under such continuous breakthroughs, he actually dared to break through the bottleneck of a realm grade 9 and succeeded. Oh, this old man is really starting to doubt life this time. Ahaha! Star Master Yi, congratulations, congratulations. Little friend, Yi has successfully broken through to the universe grade and is much closer to the undying grade. With your speed of ascension, this old man is a little doubtful that the next time I see you, I'll have to call you senior. Not bad, not bad. Little friend Ye's talent is so strong that this old man has never seen before. If we really don't meet for a year and a half with your monstrous talent, the next time we meet, you might really change and become an undying grade marquee. Ha ha ha. Accompanied by the waves of exclamations and exclamations, 2 to 3 million miles away in the atmosphere of Sky River Planet, on the huge platform that was used as the venue for the banquet, the elephant fox marten, Long Shantang, Gong Huaji, and the other 30 undying grade old monsters all soared up. Chapter 41-46. With the return of the devouring clone, Yi Xian had gained a lot. His main body's cultivation base had synchronized with the devouring clones and reached the peak of the 9th level of the Sector Lord realm. Then he had swallowed a bottle of level 19 liquid and a large amount of top-notch resources, such as the all-evil origin liquid. He had a breakthrough. He had entered the universe grade 1 and become a universe old monster. Even his mind source core, which had been dormant for a long time, had evolved into a grade 9 monster core because of this opportunity, as well as after a long period of precipitation and accumulation. Because of this, the elementary variant slave seal had been upgraded to an intermediate variant, and he had even obtained another powerful spiritual power ability, spiritual black hole. The return of an avatar had brought such great benefits to the original body. This caused Yi Xian to sigh with emotion, but at the same time, he couldn't help but look forward to it. He had a total of 2 clones. The devouring clone had returned, but the other electronic clone had not. If nothing unexpected happened, the electronic doppelganger was still in the headquarters of the machinery race. At that time, in the source of all evil, the machinery race's patriarch, Devourer, had sent a few mechanical beasts to devour the rune chains of the netherworld furnace. Yi Xian had taken advantage of this opportunity to let the electronic doppelganger possess him. One of them had taken advantage of this opportunity to enter the headquarters of the machine race. Ever since then, they had lost contact until now. When he had left, the electronic clone's cultivation base had been at the 1st level of the cosmic light grade. Now that so much time had passed, he did not know how much its cultivation base had increased and whether it had had other fortuitous encounters like the devouring clone. These thoughts flashed through his mind, but were quickly discarded by Yi Xian. After his seclusion had ended and he had successfully entered the universe grade, he had become a new universe old monster. The many guests on the huge platform outside the atmosphere of the Sky River Star had all gotten up and leaped into the void. They had all come to congratulate him. Yi Xian smiled bitterly and returned the greeting with cupped hands. After exchanging pleasantries, he returned to the huge platform and sat down. After exchanging pleasantries with the elephant fox marten, Long Shantang, Gong Huaji, and more than 20 other immortal-grade old monsters and universe old monsters from other powers, he finally left and hurriedly returned to the interior of the Sky River Star. After entering the Star-Lord's mansion on the main continent, he immediately shut his door and went into hiding. The banquet in the void lasted for 3 days and 3 nights. This was originally a celebration of the Heavenly River planet, but in the end, the main character went into hiding and refused to see any guests. The high-level representatives of the various major forces had no choice but to settle for the next best thing. In the end, they exchanged toasts with each other, and it was a joyous and harmonious atmosphere. 3 days later, the countless starships in the void outside the atmosphere of the Heavenly River star gradually dispersed, except for a small number of them, who either entered the Heavenly River star or went directly to the depths of the domain of the graveyard to try to excavate star cores. Most of the other starships returned to where they had come from. In the residents, especially the Hell Ant race, Space Rat race, Giant Ferocious race, and other races from the first universe, as well as the top 10 races from the second universe. The relationship between these races, the human race, and the myriad Luo Federation was quite subtle, so it wasn't suitable for them to stay in the third universe for long. Soon, the Skyriver sector regained its former tranquility. Moreover, with the end of the Heavenly River Star incident, the various conflicts that had been going on in the 3 universes in the past 2 years seemed to have come to an end. The dispute between the races of the second universe and the myriad Luo Federation was temporarily not mentioned because the current owner of the Great Providence had been determined to be Yi Xian of the human race. Both sides kept silent about this matter. The 2 camps of the human race, which had a slight grudge because of the recent major events, were even more so. The relationship between the Imperial Court and the Heavenly Palace was getting more and more harmonious. Even the myriad Luo Federation of the First Universe no longer clamored to drive the 4-race alliance, which was led by the demons, out of the First Universe. The demons had disappeared directly. Ever since the second-generation ancestor had taken them away with a ray of light during the Great Change on the Demon Emperor planet, this race hadn't shown up in public again. Obviously, they were hibernating in the ancestral land of the demons, conserving their strength. The other 3 powerful races of the 4-race alliance, the Hell Ant race, the Space Mouse race, and the Giant Ferocious race, were the same. The 3 races were firmly united and didn't take the initiative to provoke the myriad Luo Federation formed by the other races. They lived in harmony with each other. Even the Cage Star Field, which had suddenly appeared and replaced the entire Demon Emperor star field, had suddenly appeared. From time to time, fierce roars and beastly roars could be heard, indicating that in that star field, the fierce caged beasts and the masters of the starry sky who had entered the star field in search of fortune were fighting each other. The battle was still quite fierce, but at least the disturbance didn't spread to the outside world. In addition, since the migration of the Tianji clan, they hadn't shown up again. Suddenly, the 3 main planes of the starry skies were filled with peace and tranquility. It was as if the golden age of peace had arrived. However, this kind of peace and prosperity on the surface was obviously just an illusion, just like the temporary calm before the storm. In the 3 universe planes, almost all the high-level members of the top races and forces had fallen into silence recently, because at their level, their divine perception and premonition were extremely sharp. As long as they were immortal old monsters, recently, all of them had a kind of premonition. It was as if something shocking was about to happen. Thinking of the Cage Star Field that had just appeared in the demon domain of the first universe not long ago, many people subconsciously trembled. Although they had long known that the great wilderness world, which had been completely destroyed in the legendary battle in the distant Desolate Era, would most likely appear again in the near future. Appear, fully descend in the present world. However, when this day really came, they couldn't help but tremble in fear. That was the legendary Great Wilderness World. All kinds of ancient strange birds and fierce beasts were incomparably powerful. If a Desolate Era almighty existence jumped out, if its cultivation strength was at its peak, it could directly sweep across the 3 main planes of the starry sky. It could be said that the full descent of the Great Wilderness World was definitely a real disaster for the 3 main planes of the starry sky. Even the top races and forces didn't know how many of them could survive. Xian also had this kind of worry, and he deeply felt the same. Chapter 41-47. The Domain of Shadow Devil in the Second Universe. The domain of Shadow Devil used to be the territory of the Demon clan in the Second Universe. It was located in a remote area. The Demon race wasn't very popular among the various races of the Second Universe. Before the various races of the Second Universe had left the Myriad Luo Federation, the Demon race was one of the races that had been excluded by the Myriad Luo Federation. Because of this, in the vast territory of the Second Universe, the domain of Shadow Devil, the territory of the Demon clan, didn't have many people. Even the other races in the Second Universe rarely came here. Ever since the Devil clan was tricked by the Netherworld Young Master that Xian had transformed into, and even Nest in their ancestral grounds had been blown into a spatial vortex that was quite large, it was even more difficult to see any signs of life in this Shadow Devil Star region. In this past year, it was almost like a remote and desolate land. Only the space vortex formed after the Nest in the ancestral land of the Demon clan was blown up still existed. Moreover, it was expanding at a very slow speed. A few days ago, when the Heavenly River Star was holding a grand ceremony, more than 100 fortresses with a diameter of 100,000 meters sailed into the domain of Shadow Devil in the Second Universe. Moreover, they didn't pass by this place. After entering the domain of Shadow Devil, they stopped. It seemed that they didn't plan to leave this place in a short time. These 100 fortresses were all occupied by the members of the Demon clan. Although the Nest in the Demon clan's ancestral land had been destroyed, the Demon clan hadn't been exterminated. Apart from the crazy Emperor who was still alive and had caused quite a commotion in the first universe, there were still several tens of thousands of Demon clan members who were still wandering outside. They were the group of demons who were abducted by Xian using the identity of the young master of the Netherworld. After arriving in the Nether Turtle Star Field, the identity of the young master of the Netherworld was exposed, and they were separated from Xian. Their leader was the elder of the Demon clan, Shi. Although the chief of the Demon clan, Emperor, had come out of seclusion and his strength had skyrocketed, he was tricked by the young master of the Netherworld at the last moment of his breakthrough. Although he had the demon body, he had some problems with his brain. After hearing about the actions of the Netherworld Young Master, not only did his hatred overflow to the heavens, he also hated Xian's identity. Even the tens of thousands of clansmen, who were led by the Netherworld Young Master, were carried out by the Netherworld Young Master and swaggered around the Second Universe in a large palanquin, shouting slogans that shook the heavens. They were hated by the Emperor. He said that they had disgraced the Demon clan. Because of that, he said that one day he would kill all of them personally to clean up the clan. Since then, tens of thousands of the members of the Demon clan had become stray dogs in the first universe. They couldn't return to their homes, and they couldn't recognize their patriarchs. They had to wander outside, and they had long faded away from the main stage of the first universe. It had been more than half a year since they were last mentioned. Under the lead of Elder Shi, they quietly returned to the Shadow Devil Star Zone. When they were forced to wander in the void, these tens of thousands of their clansmen were squeezed into a big fortress that was 100,000 meters in diameter. But now, after half a year, Shi and the tens of thousands of his clansmen brought back more than 100 big fortresses. However, these hundreds of big fortresses seemed to be damaged. They didn't have the same design. Although they were all big fortresses with a diameter of 100,000 meters, there were some minor differences. Obviously, most of these big fortresses didn't come from the right way. They were like a ragtag army that had been put together one after another. And it was the truth. In the past half a year, Shi and his tens of thousands of demons had no home to return to. In fact, they hadn't done anything good. It was already nice to hear that they were wandering in the void. It would be even worse if they were exposed. This old man had been a space pirate for more than half a year with tens of thousands of his clansmen. Now that he had returned to the Shadow Devil Star Zone with more than 100 space fortresses, he had robbed them one after another in the past half a year. Although they didn't come from the right way, and the situation of these space fortresses was a bit embarrassing, more or less damaged, they were still more than 100 space fortresses. Also, they weren't small fortresses with a diameter of 50,000 meters, but large space fortresses with a diameter of 100,000 meters. Now that they were gathered together, their combat power was quite impressive. After entering the Shadow Devil Star Zone, these space fortresses drove straight to the space turbulence vortex formed by the explosion of the Yin Nest. They lined up on the right side of the vortex. In the central control room on the top floor of the flagship, Xianxia was standing in front of a 3D holographic screen. The screen was showing the space turbulence vortex that was 10,000 square kilometers wide. His eyes glittering, Xianxia suddenly waved his hand. "Begin!" Hum, hum, hum. Following his order, the space fortresses shook almost at the same time. Then a high-frequency buzzing sound came from all of them. It was obviously the sound of the space compactor being fully activated. Apparently, Yin7's purpose in returning to the domain of Shadow Devil was to repair this space disruption vortex with the help of his more than 100 star fortresses and space bridging tools. This place used to be the Yin Nest of a Shadow Devil clan, but it became like this because of the explosion. If it was repaired, it was possible that the Yin Nest of the Shadow Devil clan could reappear. Although over 100 star fortresses weren't a lot, this space turbulence whirlpool wasn't very vast either. It was only about 10,000 miles in radius. If there were no accidents, it would take 2 to 3 months of continuous repair, and the void turbulence vortex would be completely repaired. Although it was a bit difficult, it was all worth it. Xianxia did this partly because he was physically and mentally exhausted after leading tens of thousands of his clansmen to wander outside. He wanted a stable place to settle down. On the other hand, he hoped to obtain the forgiveness of the Patriarch, Yin Emperor, by repairing the Yin Nest. After all, the identity of the young master of the Netherworld clan had been separated. He was one of the 7 freaks, the embodiment of the great providence of the current era. Even the top 10 races of the second universe, the races of the first universe, the 2 camps of the human race, and the 10,000 Net Federation had been tormented by his other identities. Now that the past had been forgotten, how could Yin Emperor still not be able to see past it? In Xianxia's opinion, although he didn't know where the Patriarch, Yin Emperor, was, he hadn't heard any news from any area of the 3 major planes. He didn't hear the familiar angry roar toward the young master of the Netherworld clan. Chapter 41-48. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. During these 3 days, the hundreds of space fortresses that Xianxia brought didn't stop for a single moment. Day and night, the space compactor was fully activated, and they were trying their best to repair the space turbulence vortex in front of them. This was a very boring thing to do, and the continuous, high-frequency buzzing sound were even more disturbing. However, only 3 days had passed, and it would take at least 2 months to completely repair this turbulent space vortex that was tens of thousands of miles in circumference. It was still early. Whether it was Xianxia or the tens of thousands of Yin demons in the hundreds of space fortresses, they were all very patient and weren't in a hurry. They were already different from when they were abducted by Yi Xian as the young master of the Netherworld from the Yin Nest in the Ancestral Land. In the past half a year, they had experienced the annihilation of their clan, the destruction of the Yin Nest in the Ancestral Land, and the roaring of their clan leader everywhere. After a series of changes, the tens of thousands of Yin demons had completely matured in terms of temperament. Even Xianxia had become much calmer compared to half a year ago, when he was slightly impetuous. In fact, the experience of roaming in the void and secretly working as space pirates for almost a year had also greatly improved the cultivation and strength of the tens of thousands of Yin demons. Every time the space pirates attacked, it would definitely be a fierce battle. This was originally a way for the team to grow quickly. However, unless they were forced into a corner, no one would make such a choice. At this very moment, Looking at the hundreds of starry sky fortresses on his left and right sides of the void, he recalled the hardships and struggles that the tens of thousands of people in the starry sky fortresses had gone through in the past half a year. Xianxia suddenly felt extremely confident. He believed that as long as they could repair the Yin nest in the ancestral land, as long as they could obtain the forgiveness of the clan leader, in Emperor, then once the clan leader returned, the experienced and iron-blooded subordinates under his command would definitely be able to show the glory of the Yin demon clan once again. Boom! Hong Long Long. Just as Xianxia was lamenting, in the universe void outside the Central Territory's flagship fortress, there suddenly came a series of earth-shattering explosions without any warning, one after another, continuous and incessant. It was obvious that something big had happened. Even the void was in chaos at this moment. As a result, the huge fortress under Xianxia's feet was like a small boat at the tip of a huge wave, rocking violently. In fact, it was not only the flagship fortress that Xianxia was in, but also the other hundreds of starry sky fortresses around it. Faced with such a chaotic situation, the spaceships on the hundreds of giant fortresses had automatically stopped working. The low, high-frequency buzzing sound that had lasted for 3 whole days had completely disappeared. Instead, it was replaced by the continuous rumbling of thunder. What happened? What the hell happened? After being stunned for a short while, Xianxia immediately jumped up and roared, "I'm just using the space compactor to repair this void turbulence whirlpool. How could such an accident happen? With such a huge commotion, is the entire void going to collapse? Damn it, what the hell happened? Ah, Hong Long Long, Hong Long." Following Xianxia's furious roar, the thunderous roar that had been going on all this while suddenly became even louder. Then, before Xianxia could react, the flagship fortress that he was in seemed to be sucked in by an inexplicable force that was so huge that it could not resist, and it suddenly shot forward. The other hundreds of starry sky fortresses were in the same situation. At this moment, without exception, all of them were involuntarily rushing toward the void turbulence whirlpool in front of them. Their speed was so fast that it was far beyond the limit of this starry sky fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters. It was even 2 to 3 times the limit that it could reach. More than 3 times. At this moment, if someone were to stand in the endless void and look towards this area, they would be able to clearly see this shocking scene in its entirety. In front of them, the void turbulence vortex that was originally only 10,000 miles in radius suddenly began to expand at a terrifying speed, as if it was radiating outwards. In just a short breath of time, this turbulent space vortex, which originally only had a radius of 10,000 miles, had expanded to a radius of 1,000,000 miles. At first glance, it was as if this turbulent space vortex was a mouth in the void of the universe. Originally, it was tightly shut with only a line of lips visible. But now this mouth suddenly opened wide in anger. The terrifying suction force that appeared in an instant directly pulled Xianxia and his tens of thousands of Yin demon clansmen, as well as the hundreds of starry sky fortresses, into the depths of this black, hole-like mouth. In half a breath's time, they had completely disappeared. Oh my God, what the hell happened? At this moment, a lone figure shot over from afar. The aura that emanated from his body had actually reached the Sector Lord realm. This figure was tall and ferocious. It was clearly the blood-green nether puppet of the Yin demon clan's patriarch, Yin Emperor. To be precise, this blood-green nether puppet was actually the patriarch of the Yin demon clan, Yin Emperor. The last time Yin Emperor appeared was in the origin of all Evil Star region. At that time, he had almost died. At the last moment, in order to save his life, he had completely fused with the blood-green nether puppet beside him. Since then, he had always been like this. He was neither a human nor a ghost. He had both the heavenly demon body and the nether puppet body. He was simply a freak. However, this kind of complete fusion with the nether puppet also caused his cultivation strength to soar greatly. After finding a place to cultivate and recover from his injuries, the current Yin Emperor was already a supreme expert of the Sector Lord realm. The reason why he suddenly returned to the Shadow Devil Star region of the Second Universe was that, like Xianxia, He had also received news from the heavenly river star of the third universe, and knew the true identity of young Master Netherworld. When he thought of the fact that the other party was actually one of the 7 great freaks and was also the owner of the great fortune of the current era, he felt that the Een Emperor's heart was in chaos. Even the various clans of the first universe, the top 10 clans of the second universe, as well as the human race and the myriad Luo Federation, who had been tormented miserably by his other identities, had all given up their past grudges under the pressure of the current situation in the 3 main Starry Sky planes. They were all trying to be on good terms with Yi Xian. Een Emperor felt an incomparable sense of desolation in his heart. With the current situation of the other party, let alone taking revenge and venting his anger, as a mere sector lord like him, as soon as he appeared, there was no need for the other party to personally take action. Those immortal realm old freaks of the top clans and forces who wanted to curry favor with him, hoping to repair their relationship, would jump at the first moment. Chapter 41-49. Boom! Rumble. Earth-shaking rumbles resounded endlessly. Originally, it was only a radius of 10,000 miles, but due to the sudden appearance of the unforeseen event, it instantly radiated outwards. Within a breath's time, it had reached a radius of 1,000,000 miles, and now it was still spreading outwards. It was like a collapsing black hole, occupying a larger and larger area of the universe's void. However, compared to before, where it had expanded 10 times in less than a breath's time, the space vortex was now spreading outwards. Although it was still spreading outwards, its speed was clearly much slower. Even so, because the commotion was too great, the entire universe was still affected by it. Within an area with a radius of hundreds of millions of miles, the void was trembling slightly. 20 to 30 million miles away, the Een Emperor, the patriarch of the Een Demon clan, who had completely fused with the blood-green nether puppet, stood in the universe's void with a gloomy expression. He seemed to be thinking about something, and he softly muttered, "It seems that a new, unforeseen event is about to happen in this space vortex. Why does it feel like the Demon Emperor star field in the core area of the Demon Dweller star field in the first universe? Why does it feel like a world that doesn't belong here is about to descend? In addition, I clearly saw more than 100 starry sky fortresses here." Listening to the unique high-frequency humming sound, it should be the space compactor installed on the big fortresses that is repairing this void turbulence vortex? Could it be that idiot Een Shi? Otherwise, the Een Nest was originally located in a remote and barren area in the first universe's plane. Now that the Een Nest is gone, this star field has no value at all. Who else would spend so much effort to use 100 starry sky fortresses to repair this space vortex? After saying this, Een Emperor's eyes flashed, and the murderous aura in his body instantly spread out again. He gnashed his teeth and said hatefully, "Idiots! A bunch of idiots! Using the space compaction device to repair a space vortex with a radius of 10,000 miles actually caused such a big mess. You can't accomplish anything, but you're more likely to spoil things. It's just that, after roaring a few times, the anger in Een Emperor's heart seemed to have more or less dissipated, and the feeling of desolation and loneliness that he had felt recently surged in his heart once again. After a short moment of silence, he suddenly sighed faintly, forget it. Even though I didn't do a good job and messed it up, these little bastards still have the heart. If possible, I can't ignore them. But all of this still depends on their own luck. If they really can't enter this turbulent void vortex, then this emperor can't do anything." After saying that, Een Emperor's eyes flashed once again, and he raised his head to look at the black hole-like chaotic space vortex that was still expanding in the distance. At that very moment, because it had expanded too quickly and was too vast, the original chaotic space vortex had completely disappeared. What appeared in front of him was a black hole-like void. Moreover, the edge of the black hole was still pushing forward, as if it would continue forever without end. His realm was ordinary, but this was obviously impossible. The largest black hole in the 3 starry skies main planes was only a few tens of millions of kilometers in diameter, and even that it had taken several tens of thousands of years to slowly form. As for this place, it was merely formed by the sudden change of a void turbulence vortex. In a short period of time, no matter how vast the final area was, it should be able to stabilize very soon if nothing unexpected happened. After muttering to himself for a while, Emperor finally suppressed the thought of turning around and leaving. He still stood in the distant void, calmly waiting. In the blink of an eye, half a day passed. When he seemed to have sensed something, he opened his eyes from his cross-legged meditation and looked at the distant void in front of him. The scene that entered his eyes left him completely dumbfounded, and he couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. His perception wasn't wrong. The black hole that had been expanding had indeed stopped, and it was no longer expanding. Moreover, its interior had clearly stabilized. However, in just half a day, the black hole in front of him had expanded to a diameter of 30 to 40 million kilometers. This could definitely be considered a large black hole, and it would be the same in any of the 3 Starry Skies main planes. However, this wasn't much. What truly shocked Emperor was that after the vast black hole stopped expanding and completely stabilized, the ancient starry sky that appeared within it was an ancient starry sky. That's right. Inside the black hole was clearly an ancient starry sky, and it emitted an endless and heavy, desolate aura. Without a doubt, this ancient starry sky was the same as the cage world in the center of the Demon Dweller starfield in the first universe. It was also part of the Desolate era. Originally, it wasn't on this plane, drifting in some chaotic space-time. But now, because of the sudden change in the Ness vortex, this corner of the desolate world had revealed a part of it. Now, a corner of it was revealed, and it was connected to the domain of Shadow Devil in this second universe. This scene was too shocking. A corner of the ancient desolate world had suddenly appeared without any warning. Although it didn't descend completely like the cage world in the first universe, it was no different from opening a path to this corner of the ancient desolate world in the second universe's Shadow Devil starfield. And Emperor was close enough to see the entire process. At this time, he was completely stunned. The corner of the desolate world in front of him was clearly extremely deep, and he couldn't see the end of it. But even at the periphery of the black hole, there were large amounts of desolate beast remains that he had never seen before. For example, the golden lion vulture, the blue-eyed golden eagle, the 9-tailed coxcomb snake, the 3-headed bone snake, the red phosphorus twin-tailed snake, the blood moon demonic wolf, the dark purple star wolf, the yellow lightning wolf. There were also amethyst behemoths, 5-color divine oxen, gold moon shrew toads, blood jade spiders, 6-winged heavenly demonic insects, blue-eyed golden-eyed beasts, blood-eyed demonic apes, purgatory blood phoenixes, purple gold dragon pythons, and all kinds of strange and bizarre creatures that had long disappeared from the present world. He even saw a slender silver dragon. Its body was thin, and it was at least 100,000 meters long. Its slender tail looked like a long whip, and it had a large and sharp nose on its shining head. There was a pair of small horns that curved forward behind its jaw, and a pair of large horns behind its eyes. Moreover, its wings could reflect light like a mirror, giving it a metallic texture. Chapter 4150. Without a doubt, this black dragon, whose body was over 200,000 zhang long, was extremely powerful. The aura of its bloodline was too intense. Even though it had been dead for countless years, its body still emitted a terrifying aura that could cause the world to tremble. This was especially so when the edges of its scales and irises were inlaid with the same fine golden edges. When one looked at it, one could feel as if there were ripples of golden light flashing invisibly in the eyes. The black and sturdy scales and the mystical fine golden lines around its irises clearly showed that this was a mutated black dragon with an extremely powerful body and some kind of powerful eye technique. Its peak battle strength back then was very likely not as simple as the legendary Almighty of the primordial era. It was very likely that it was a supreme being of the primordial era. When he thought of this, Emperor's entire body trembled uncontrollably. It wasn't fear but excitement. To him, This corner of the primordial era connected to the black hole was simply a supreme treasure trove. Just the corpses of the primordial era, ferocious birds, and strange beasts were enough for him to enjoy for several lifetimes. There was simply no way he could use them all up. What's more, what was in his line of sight was only the outermost edge of this corner of the primordial era. From the fact that it was so deep that even the old monsters of the sector lords couldn't see the end of it, it was very likely that there were even more shocking opportunities in the depths of this corner of the primordial era. Fate and fortune. He didn't even doubt that with the corpses of the primordial era, ferocious birds and strange beasts, not to mention the puny undying realm, he would definitely be able to step into the Marquis realm, Emperor realm, or even Emperor realm in the future. Emperor realm? I didn't even dare to think about it at first, but now, it seems that anything is possible. As his body trembled, Emperor didn't hesitate anymore. At this moment, he had already thrown Shi and the tens of thousands of demon clansmen that had been sucked into this corner of the primordial era to the back of his mind. Right now, the only thought in his mind was to take advantage of the fact that this place hadn't been exposed yet and wasn't discovered by more powerful beings of the starry sky and various powers. He would immediately rush in and do his best to harvest the corpses of the primordial era creatures that were strewn all over the place like trash. These were all supreme cultivation resources that one could only come across by chance. Whoa! While feeling excited, Emperor's huge nether skull turned into a streak of blood-green light. He quickly traversed more than 20 million miles of space and plunged into the vast black hole in front of him. For the past few days, Xian had been staying in the Star-Lord Mansion on the Sky River planet. He had been trying to communicate with the corpse lantern tattoo on his left chest, but to no avail. He had been feeling a little depressed. For the past few days, the three main starry skies have been excessively quiet. Xian had always had a bad premonition, and his heart was anxious. Until yesterday, this extremely uneasy feeling suddenly became very strong. Although he still couldn't tell whether it was a good or bad omen, he knew that the three main starry skies of the current world were all very quiet. Somewhere, there was probably a huge change that had happened. Since then, Xian had been waiting. Unfortunately, whether it was in the first universe or the second universe, there was no special news. As for the third universe, where the human clan was, there wasn't even the slightest movement. Just as he was feeling doubtful and wondering if he had overlooked something, a thunderclap suddenly came from the second universe without warning. Caught off guard, Xian was burned on the outside and tender on the inside. He stood in place with his mouth wide open. His mind was buzzing, and his whole person was stunned. The shadow demon star field in the second universe, which was the chaotic space vortex formed after the nest of the former demon clan's ancestral land was blown up, had changed. The news came from the Blood Dragon clan, one of the top 10 clans in the second universe. There was an immortal realm old monster in the Blood Dragon clan, the three-clawed Flood Dragon, who had long since surrendered to Xian. This time, it was him who had passed on this news through some secret channel. Because this matter was too important, the top 10 clans in the second universe immediately arranged an army outside the two wormholes leading to the third universe and the first universe after receiving the news. They didn't allow this news to spread from the second universe. Of course, in the end, paper couldn't wrap up fire. No matter how tight the blockade was, the news would leak out one day. The top 10 clans in the second universe were well aware of this, but they still did it. They didn't even care about how the other top clans and forces in the other two main starry skies would view this matter after the news leaked out in the future. They didn't even seem to care about the thoughts of Xian, the person who represented the great destiny of the current world. Even though, just a few days ago, the top 10 clans in the second universe had come to the Heavenly River planet in the third universe in an attempt to repair their relationship with Xian. All of this was because the benefits represented by this unforeseen event were too amazing. According to the news sent by the three-clawed Flood Dragon, the Yin's Nest Void Turbulence Vortex, which was originally only tens of thousands of miles in radius, had now become a black hole with a diameter of tens of millions of miles. Inside the black hole was a corner of the ancient, desolate world that was so deep that it was boundless. Just in the void at the edge, there was a huge amount of ancient beasts, the remains of birds and exotic beasts. Whether it was the quantity or the quality of the remains of these ancient creatures, they far surpassed everything in the first universe's source of all evil star field. The top 10 clans in the second universe clearly wanted to eat it alone. They didn't want this cake to be divided between the two camps of the human race and the clans of the first universe. In order to ensure this, they even sent a large number of troops to monitor the Nether Turtle star field, which had already been sealed to prevent the Nether Turtle clan from leaking this matter. F***CK. Something big is going to happen. The time for this Star Master to set off again has come. After recovering from this shocking news, Xian immediately waved his hand and summoned the Life Stronghold. With a flash of his body, he directly arrived at the lowest level of the stronghold. Here, there was a slime brood mother, and at every moment, a large number of evil spirit slimes were hatching. The next moment, a familiar system notification sounded in his mind. Ding! Congratulations, host. Discovered Crystal of Elves. The Crystal of Elves was the crystallization of the power within the slime, and it was one of the natural life energy that could be absorbed by the world bug's self-evolving group. This crystal was one of the important resources for the evolution of Life Fortress, and it was also the reason why Xian had come to the lowest level of the fortress. This time, he wanted to quickly upgrade the level of Life Fortress. So Xian decided to collect a large number of Crystal of Elf for the world bug's self-evolving group to absorb. He immediately gave the order to collect. Half an hour later, hundreds of thousands of Crystal of Elves were gathered together, turned into a ray of light, and shot into Xian's hand. Chapter 4151. Generally speaking, there were three types of space fortresses. Small fortresses with a diameter of 50,000 meters. Large fortresses with a diameter of 100,000 meters. In addition to these two types, there was also a Starry Sky Fortress. The diameter of the Starry Sky Fortress exceeded 100,000 meters, which was 300,000 meters. Xian's Starry Sky Battle could barely be considered a Starry Sky Giant Fortress level killing weapon. However, it couldn't be called a Starry Sky Giant Fortress because it only had a diameter of 300,000 meters, which was 300,000 meters. The Space Fortress had a large head and a small body. The body of the Space Fortress couldn't be compared to a Space Fortress. What's more, this Space Fortress was a special weapon of war. It wasn't a Space Fortress in the normal sense. Speaking of which, the Heaven's Legacy race's headquarters, the Heaven's Legacy City, was a true space fortress. Normally, it could stretch out and turn into a starry sky continent. There were mountains, rivers, and even cities on it. During wartime, if necessary, it could instantly shrink and transform into a sphere with a diameter of 1 million meters, which was 330,000 meters, or 1,000 kilometers, and quickly travel through the universe and the galaxy. In addition to the Tianji City, it was said that the immortal dynasty of the human race also had a similar star fortress. However, compared to the Tianji City, there was a gap. Its diameter was only 100,000 feet, which was 300,000 meters, which was much smaller. Also, it was said that the human race's Tenju celestial palaces also had a super space fortress. However, it was only 100,000 meters in diameter, like the space fortress of the immortal dynasty. Currently, the life stronghold in Xian's hands had only grown to the size of a large stronghold, which was only 100,000 meters long. There was still quite a bit of distance between it and the minimum requirement of 300,000 meters. It wasn't that the growth of the world bug that formed the life stronghold was slow. At this level, it was very difficult to increase it any further. Its current size of 100,000 meters was deliberately limited by Xian. The reason for this was because the size of a 100,000-meter stronghold was already enough for Xian. However, the situation this time was obviously different. The entrance was located in the mysterious, desolate, great world in the Shadow Devil Star zone of the second universe. It was very deep. After entering, one might not be able to come back often. Moreover, the creatures of the desolate great world were all very large. Furthermore, Yi Xian's current strength was sufficient. Therefore, he could control an even larger space fortress. Therefore, upgrading the life fortress from its current size of 100,000 meters in diameter to a giant fortress of 300,000 meters in diameter was a must. The elven crystal was the crystallization of the energy inside the slime. It was the natural life energy that could be absorbed by the worldworms. Moreover, the elven crystal's effect on the growth of the worldworms had been proven to be very good. These hundreds of thousands of elven crystals weren't considered small. According to the calculations of Yi Xian's devouring system, it was enough to easily grow the life stronghold to over 100,000 meters, which was 300,000 meters. It was even possible for it to reach 200,000 meters. The headquarters of the Heaven's Legacy race, Heaven's Legacy City, was only 330,000 meters. If the life fortress could reach 200,000 meters, and, at the same time, its internal structure and performance would be improved as well, then even if he didn't use the Farmer God Cauldron, which was as large as a superstar in its complete form, he would be able to use it. With the life fortress in his hands, Yi Xian would have the confidence to challenge the Heaven's Legacy race. In reality, although the Farmer God Cauldron was powerful, it was still lacking in some aspects compared to a purely combat space fortress. In terms of roaming the universe, the life fortress was still more convenient. However, even with the life energy required for the evolution of the worldworms, and a large amount of it at that, they still needed time to grow. Yi Xian handed over all of the hundreds of thousands of elven crystals to the devouring system, and ordered the system to absorb the energy within them. After injecting it into the life fortress, he waved his hand and stored the life fortress into his undying world. According to his estimation, this evolution and growth would take about 3 days. Of course, this time referred to the overall improvement of the life fortress's size and internal performance, not just its volume. Otherwise, it would have been completed in less than half a day. After doing all this, Yi Xian immediately returned to the Star-Lord's mansion on the Skyriver Star planet. Through the Skyriver Star Network's AI control center, he ordered Old Ghost Mosquito Butcher and the generals under Naples to come to the Star-Lord's mansion to discuss important matters. Very soon, a group of people who had been working hard with Yi Xian since a long time ago gathered at the Star-Lord's mansion on the Skyriver Star. Yi Xian explained the general situation to everyone, then changed the topic and directly expressed his intentions. This time, although the desolate world that the second universe's Shadow Devil Star Domain has descended into is not like the Cage Star Domain of the first universe's Demon Star Domain, it is a corner of the desolate world. The entire world has descended. However, compared to the Cage Starfield and the Demonkin Starfield, the mysterious Desolate Era Starfield and the Shadow Devil Starfield in the first universe is much deeper and farther away. It's impossible to know how deep it is. Moreover, there are already a large number of corpses of enormous Desolate Era creatures in its periphery. They have appeared. Their level is not inferior to that of the core of the root of all evil. From this, we can roughly infer that this mysterious desolate world is very likely the center of the battle of the primordial era. Even if it isn't, it is definitely a corner of the Shattered Star Domain that is extremely close to the center of the battle. Currently, the situation facing the 3 main planes of the starry skies is extremely worrisome. The great chaos of the primordial era can descend at any time. At this time, entering the Shattered Star Realm, which is close to the core of the great battle, is of great significance. There will definitely be many discoveries. After saying that, Yi Xian paused for a moment, turned around, and swept his gaze over the experts present before continuing. So, I decided to enter immediately. Furthermore, I won't bring too many people with me this time. What I mean is, only Gue Hai Dao and Song Qingyu will bring 10,000 Devil Cultivator Scouts with them. Just bring me along with you. In addition, I will take the Shinnon Cauldron, the other star domains, and the Life Fortress with me. The Life Fortress will complete its first evolution in 3 days. At that time, it will grow to nearly 200,000 feet, which is 600,000 meters in diameter. Its interior will also be equipped with the space folding technology, so the space will be even larger. Chapter 4152. No, this old man doesn't agree. As soon as Xian finished speaking, old Devil Mosquito Butcher rolled his eyes and immediately objected. Why don't you take this old man with you? Naples quickly followed up. If he was alone, he obviously wouldn't dare to disagree with Xian. But with old Devil Mosquito Butcher taking the lead, he naturally wouldn't let go of this opportunity and immediately joined in, nodding his head like a chicken pecking at rice. Yes, 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 me too. That's what I mean. In the end, it wasn't that these two guys didn't want Xian to go, but that they also wanted to go. If you all go, what about Planet Triumphant Return and Planet Skyriver? Are you going to give up just like that? Xian was speechless and shook his head with a bitter smile. He didn't give these two guys a chance to continue speaking and directly made the decision. This matter is settled. If you all want to go, you could decide according to the situation. If the situation requires it, you can enter as the second batch of reinforcements. As for entering, that's right. This matter is so big that no matter how the races of the second universe try to cover it up, the news will soon leak out. When that time comes, countless forces of various sizes on the three main planes of the starry skies will flock there. That mysterious, desolate world will definitely be a mess. Old Devil Mosquito Butcher didn't refute Xian's words this time and nodded in agreement. In that case, we will first prepare in secret on Planet Triumphant Return and Planet Skyriver. When everything is ready and the situation requires it, we will immediately set off. Very well, this matter is settled. Guihai Yi Dao, Song Qingyu, you two choose your candidates within 3 days. Each of you will lead 10,000 demon scouts and board the ship in 3 days. With that, Xian waved his hand and dismissed the meeting. 3 days later, Xian waved his hand in a remote area of Planet Skyriver and activated Life Fortress. Rumble, a true colossus, suddenly appeared without any warning and stood in front of Xian. Even the air was suppressed to the point that low and deep thunderous sounds could be heard. After 3 whole days, the Life Fortress had completely changed. Previously, it was only 100,000 meters in diameter, but now it was more than 160,000 meters in diameter, which was 500,000 meters. Even compared to the headquarters of the Tianji city of the Tianji clan, it was half its diameter. In terms of kilometers, it was 500 kilometers, just like a miniature planet. Moreover, even the shape had changed from the previous spherical shape to the current oblate shape. This shape was more suitable for galloping through the starry skies of the universe, and its speed would be faster. Xian blankly stared at the colossus in front of him for a few moments before he recovered from his shock. His figure flashed as he entered the interior of the Life Giant Fortress. Compared to before, just the exterior of the Life Giant plug had expanded many times. As for the interior space, because of the use of spatial folding technology, it was obviously much more spacious. As soon as Xian entered, his eyes lit up. He could see that this was clearly a place that was like an independent paradise. There were mountains and rivers, and he couldn't tell that this was the interior of a starry sky fortress at all. Of course, this was only one layer of the giant astral fortress. In fact, such a huge giant astral fortress had a diameter of 500 kilometers. No matter how vast the space inside was, how could there only be one layer? If that was the case, it would waste too much space. There were a total of 18 levels in the entire giant fortress of life. Each level had a different scenery and a different function. Xian swept past them one by one, as if he was looking at flowers on horseback. Afterwards, he flashed out and waved his hand to store it into the undying world within his body. Then, he returned to the Star-Lord residence in Heavenly River City. The moment he arrived, he saw 20,000 demon soldiers gathered in front of the Star-Lord residence. Although these 20,000 demon cultivator scouts were led by Guihai Yi Dao and Song Qingyu, the two captains, Xian clearly saw quite a few familiar faces among them. For example, Nabashin, Bachai, Li Mosquito, Zhuofengtai, and the others. These guys were all old friends of Xian. Their cultivation was far stronger than Guihai Yi Dao and Song Qingyu. They were close to the universe realm. But this time, in order to go with Yi Xian to the mysterious, desolate ancient world, they had shamelessly snuck into this army of 20,000 demon soldiers to be ordinary scouts. This scene also caused Yi Xian to be drunk. Fortunately, the great general manager of the demon slaves, Barker, Tu Wei, Balu, the demon race think tank, Hong Ji, Pilo, and the others didn't get involved. It was enough for them to lead and manage the other demons in Heavenly River Star. Therefore, Yi Xian didn't reprimand Neboshin and the others for sneaking into the two demon scout armies to be the soldiers at the front. He just turned a blind eye to it and brought it over. At this time, there was already a star fortress hovering in the sky above the Star-Lord residence. It was the Black Mosquito ship that Yi Xian was most familiar with. Although he had the Life Fortress, it was not suitable to expose it now. Besides, it was too big to pass through the star passage in Heavenly River Planet's atmosphere. Therefore, they could only leave through the Black Mosquito ship for the time being. Just as Guihai Yidao and Song Qingyu gave the order for all 20,000 Devil Cultivator scouts to board the ship, a figure flew out from the City Lord's mansion and directly arrived in front of Yi Xian, requesting to accompany them. It was none other than Ying Tai of the Tianji clan, who had given Yi Xian a headache in the past. Of course, the current Ying Tai was no longer a member of the Tianji clan. The imperial preceptor of the Eternal Dynasty, Devourer, had secretly modified her. The current Ying Tai was a pure member of the Machinery clan. However, the Machinery clan and the Tianji clan were actually the same in essence. They were all mechanical life forms, but they were from different camps. Yi Xian did not know this, but ever since Ying Tai was secretly modified by the imperial preceptor, Devourer, and became a spy of the Machinery clan that Devourer had planted beside Yi Xian, Ying Tai's personality had completely changed from before. She did not speak much and would not be an eyesore, even if she was by his side. Considering the fact that they were going to encounter all kinds of situations in that mysterious primordial world, it was very likely that it would come in handy if they brought a mechanical artificial intelligence life with them. Therefore, he nodded and agreed to Ying Tai's request after pondering it for a while. At this time, the 20,000 demon soldiers led by Guihai Yidao and Song Qingyu had all boarded the ship and entered the Black Mosquito ship. Seeing Yi Xian nod in agreement, Ying Tai was very happy. She turned around and flew into the Black Mosquito ship. This time, I'm leaving secretly. Don't announce this to the public. Also, if there are visitors, just tell them that I'm in seclusion. Chapter 4153. In fact, Yi Xian didn't even need to use the wormhole to travel to Universe 2. He had the planar level interstellar coordinate jump ability. He could directly activate it, and he would be able to cross over from Universe 3 to Universe 2 in an instant. Now, with his planar level interstellar coordinate jump ability, after the last system title upgrade, he had the authority to imprint 2 interstellar coordinates in each universe. In Universe 1, Yi Xian had imprinted 2 interstellar coordinates. One was the black hole of life, and the other was the star field, the source of all evil. But in Universe 3, in Universe 2, he had only imprinted 1 interstellar coordinate. In Universe 3, it was the star field of death, while in Universe 2, it just so happened that it was near the void turbulence vortex where the Een nest of the Een demon clan was located. This time, Yi Xian decided to imprint the 2nd interstellar coordinate of Universe 3 before he left. After all, Heavenly River Star was now his private planet. It was extremely necessary to leave an interstellar coordinate there, just like Planet Triumph, in case there was a need. Even if he was in another universe, he could directly activate the planar level interstellar coordinate jump ability and return in an instant. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at the depths of Heavenly River Sea and found an extremely remote area. After confirming that everything was suitable, he immediately issued an order to the system and began to imprint the 2nd interstellar coordinate of Universe 3. The system's prompt sounded in his mind, guiding Yi Xian step by step to imprint the coordinates. A strand of primordial spirit that had been processed through various methods was refined into a special imprint by Yi Xian with ease. Then, this primordial spirit imprint was shot out of his body in an extremely mysterious and complicated manner. It connected with the void trench in the depths of the sea in front of Yixian, and finally completely merged with it. This was already the 5th time he had imprinted an interstellar coordinate, but the pain of forcibly separating a strand of his own primordial spirit was still difficult for Yixian to get used to. It was simply indescribable, but he forced himself to endure until the strand of primordial spirit was separated. Yixian did not immediately adjust his breathing to recover his mind. Instead, he forcefully endured the various discomforts of his injured soul core and pulled himself together before using different and complicated methods to ceaselessly condense this strand of soul core. This process consumed a great deal of effort. In the end, Yixian paid close attention to the entire process. From connecting the void to matching the primordial spirit brand to the perfect fusion, he did not dare to relax at all. After a total of half a day, his second interstellar coordinate in Universe 3 was finally perfectly integrated into the void of this deep-sea corner of Sky River Planet. It completely stabilized and disappeared. Even Yixian could not catch the slightest trace of its aura. At this point, everything was considered complete. Without any hesitation, Yixian waved his hand and immediately ordered the devouring system in his body to activate the interplanar coordinate jump ability. This time, the jump coordinate he locked onto was the Shadow Demon Star Domain in Universe 2. It was not far from the void turbulence vortex formed after the explosion of the Een nest in the ancestral land of the Een Demon clan, which was also the entrance passage to the mysterious primordial world. Perhaps no one would have expected that even though the 2 interplanar wormholes connecting Universe 1 and Universe 3 to Universe 2 had long been strictly guarded by the armies of the top 10 clans in Universe 2, Yixian had still quietly entered the interplanar world of Universe 2. Moreover, he had directly appeared near the entrance passage to the mysterious primordial world that had just descended not long ago. It took almost no effort for him to easily blend in and enter that mysterious primordial world. Time passed slowly. In the blink of an eye, 3 full days had passed since Yixian had left Sky River Planet using the interplanar coordinate jump ability. During these 3 days, except for the interplanar wormhole passageways leading to the other 2 universes, which were completely blocked off, even the interplanar wormhole passageways leading to the other 2 universes were heavily guarded. No one was allowed to leave or enter the interplanar world of Universe 2. Everything seemed to be very quiet, and nothing special happened. Since a piece of the primordial world fragment had completely descended in Universe 1, replacing the Demon Emperor Star Domain. Therefore, the rumor that the great primordial chaos was about to descend in full force had become the consensus of almost all the clans and forces in the 3 main universes of the universe. Ever since the current owner of the Great Destiny was determined to be the Heavenly River Star Master, Yixian, all the races and powers in the 3 Great Plains had quieted down. In the recent period of time, the 3 great starry skies had all been shrouded in an extremely silent and oppressive atmosphere. Everyone felt that something big was about to happen. However, even the super old monsters who were the best of the art of deduction could not deduce any information at all. Not even a few words. This situation made people uneasy. Therefore, in this oppressive atmosphere, almost all the clans and forces in Universe 1 and Universe 3 had been dormant recently. Very few of them had made any big moves. Even the bands of space pirates who were wandering in the void had returned to their bases to hide, secretly making preparations. Under such circumstances, the number of so-called planar-level starship caravans was naturally far fewer than usual. Because of this, it had been several days since the change in Universe 2, but the news had not leaked out. It was not that there were no interstellar individual cultivators or commercial fleets that entered Universe 2 through the dimension-level space wormholes in Universe 1 and Universe 3. However, they were usually wiped out as soon as they entered. Just a small fleet of space pirates could be easily wiped out by the tens of millions of troops of the top 10 clans in Universe 2, who were guarding the entrances of the 2 universe wormholes. However, paper could not wrap fire in the end. On this day, a huge change suddenly occurred in the first universe. After leaving the cage, star domain, where it had just descended, it had disappeared for a period of time. No one knew where it had gone. However, on this day, it suddenly appeared, and as soon as it appeared, it directly rushed into the dimension-level space wormhole in Universe 1 that led to Universe 2. It was obviously going to go from Universe 1 to Universe 2. Chapter 4154. The Netherworld Furnace had reappeared, and it was acting strangely. The news was immediately sent back to the third universe of the human race. Soon, the top leaders of the two camps of the human race and the core elders of the Wan Luo Federation Senate learned about it. Then, the immortal dynasty of the Science and Technology Camp, the Tenju Celestial Palace of the Cultivation Camp, and the Senate of the Wan Luo Federation each sent two immortal old monsters to the second universe to check out the situation. Immortal old monsters had the ability to directly tear apart the space barrier of the great universe. But in that case, if they only sent a projection doppelganger over, the risk was almost negligible. Even if the projection doppelganger was lost in the endless space turbulence, the loss would be limited. However, if the original body went there personally, there was still a certain amount of risk in this method. Therefore, unless the situation was urgent, even the immortal realm old monsters would not choose this risky method if they wanted to go to another universe plane. In addition, the situation of the three main planes of the starry sky was not optimistic. The legendary Great Chaos of the Primordial Age could arrive at any time. When that time came, even immortal old monsters might not be able to guarantee their survival. Therefore, even if they wanted to preserve their strength, under such circumstances, if it was not absolutely necessary, immortal old monsters would not directly tear apart the void to travel across the universe. These 6 immortal old monsters from the 3 top forces of the third universe were exactly like that. After receiving the order from the top leaders of their races, they immediately rushed to the graveyard star field and went directly to the depths of this star field. They rushed into the plane-level wormhole leading to the second universe and disappeared in the blink of an eye. The same scene was playing out in the first universe. The news that the Netherworld Furnace had reappeared and mysteriously went to the second universe was received by the races of the first universe almost at the same time as the 3 top forces of the human race. After that, the Hell Ant race, the Space Rat race, the Giant Ferocious race, and some other races in the alliance of 10,000 races in the first universe all sent out an immortal old monster. After rushing to the edge of the demon sector, they all rushed into the wormhole leading to the second universe. For a time, the 3 main planes of the starry sky were stirred up and gathered in the second universe. The second universe. At the exits of the 2 plane-level wormholes leading to the first universe and the third universe, there was an army of starships of all kinds stationed there. There were tens of millions of starships of all kinds. The 2 plane-level wormholes were not far from each other, only tens of millions of miles apart. In a universe, tens of millions of miles were not too far away. The 2 armies of tens of millions of starships stationed outside the 2 plane-level wormholes were mainly led by 9 of the top 10 races of the second universe, including the Blood Dragon Clan, the Green Rock Clan, the Warrior Lion Clan, the Inji Clan, the Raging Bull Clan, the Golden Eagle Clan, Colorful Python Clan, and the Tree Clan. As for the Dark Tortoise Clan, which was also one of the top 10 clans because they had already announced that they would completely seal off their clans, the Dark Tortoise Clan had not participated in any of the recent joint actions of the clans in the second universe. In fact, not a single Nether Turtle could be seen in the entire Nether Turtle star field. The Nether Turtle star who went to the Sky River planet in the third universe and participated in the ceremony of the Master of Yixian star field was the only being of the Nether Turtle clan who showed up in the 3 main planes of the starry sky in the past half a year. Even so, the other 9 races of the top 10 races of the second universe, including the Blood Dragon Clan and the Green Rock Clan, still sent a fleet to the Nether Turtle star field. They kept a close watch on the periphery of the Nether Turtle star field in case an immortal level powerhouse from this race tore through the void and left. Everything that happened in the dimensions on the second day after the incident in the Shadow Devil Star field, the upper echelons of the various races of the second universe learned about everything that happened in the Nest turbulent whirlpool. The sudden appearance of this mysterious desolate world shocked the various races of the second universe. The upper echelons of the various races felt that a great fortune was coming. They immediately sent one or two immortal-level old monsters to lead a small exploration fleet to the space that was tens of millions of miles wide. They rushed into the interior of the mysterious desolate world through the tunnel. This was just the vanguard. Their main purpose was to explore. Later, the various races of the second universe would form an army and enter the desolate world to plunder all kinds of resources. Now, the various races had basically finished their preparations. If nothing unexpected happened, the second main army would depart in 1 or 2 days at the earliest. They would depart from the ancestral lands of the various races of the second universe and enter this mysterious desolate world in a mighty manner. They naturally knew that the news about this mysterious desolate world would eventually leak out. However, that didn't matter. As long as they could delay it for 1 or 2 months, the various races of the second universe who entered the desolate world first would have already made a lot of money. At that time, even if the armies of the first universe and the third universe arrived, they would only be able to eat some bones and drink some soup behind them. This was a wishful thinking, but unfortunately, man proposes and God disposes. Just as the second main army of the various races of the second universe was about to depart, an accident finally happened. Voila! An earth-shattering crash suddenly sounded. At the same time, a gigantic figure as huge as a star rushed out of the plane-level wormhole that led to the first universe. It was the infamous Netherworld Furnace of the first universe's source of all evil in the starfield. At this moment, the Netherworld Furnace rushed out of the plane-level wormhole. On both sides of the furnace's outer wall, there were tens of thousands of rune chains that were millions of miles long. As it rushed out of the wormhole, the earth-shattering sound of the chains appeared because of this. At first glance, it was as if a giant tentacle monster with a round and bloated body had suddenly rushed out of a wormhole. In fact, for the experts of the various races of the second universe who were guarding this plane-level wormhole, they would rather see a giant tentacle monster rushing out of the wormhole at this time. Even if it was a group of them, it wouldn't matter. After all, the fierce reputation of the Netherworld Furnace was too deeply rooted in people's hearts. Its sudden arrival was basically tantamount to announcing a bloody catastrophe that would soon descend on this starfield. The tens of millions of starships guarding this place came from various races of the second universe, but they were mainly led by the Battle Lion clan, the Inji clan, the Raging Bull clan, and the Golden Eagle clan, which were among the top 10 most powerful races. Chapter 4155. My God, Netherworld Furnace? I actually saw a Netherworld Furnace in the second universe? Hasn't it been wreaking havoc in the first universe? When did it learn how to travel between planes? Evolution. There is no doubt that the Netherworld Furnace has evolved again after the bloody plunder in the demon territory. The intelligence of the spirit inside, it is even higher. Otherwise, it would never be able to enter the wormhole and travel between planes. Damn it, is this broken furnace crazy? Why did it come to the second universe at such a time? Even if we don't mention its terrifying destructive power, just the fact that it crossed planes to come here must have alarmed the higher-ups of the various races in the other 2 universes. There is no doubt about this. Maybe the 2 human camps, the Wan Luo Federation, and the various races in the first universe have already sent Immortal Realm old monsters here. It's over. The news will be leaked after all. Report back to the races immediately and let the second main force set off immediately. We must plunder as many resources as possible before the forces of the other universes gather here. That's not important. The key is what to do now. This wormhole, are we still guarding it? Guarding? How? This is the infamous Netherworld Cauldron and the origin of all Evil Star area. Even the almighty beings of the desolate antiquity era might not be able to defeat it easily. Us 6 Immortal Realm old monsters might not even be enough to fill the gap between its teeth. Along with the uproar in the void, the netherworld cauldron, which had been continuously rattling, suddenly became louder. After rushing out of the wormhole, the netherworld cauldron didn't stop at all, as if it had already sensed something. It actually identified the direction of the Shadow Devil Star area and waved the 2 chains outside the cauldron. Tens of thousands of rune chains unfolded at an extremely fast speed and rushed straight ahead. Unfortunately, among the tens of millions of starships stationed in the second universe, there happened to be 2 races with nearly 2 million starships in the front, blocking the netherworld furnace's path. At this moment, countless masters of the various races in the second universe in the nearly 2 million starships of various types almost had a mental breakdown. If they had a choice, they probably wouldn't choose to station in this direction, even if they were beaten to death. In fact, if they had time, they would rather immediately open up a channel for the netherworld furnace to rush over without any hindrance. Unfortunately, that was only an if, because the 2 million battleships were very close to the exit of the wormhole, and the speed at which the netherworld furnace rushed out of the wormhole was extremely fast. There was not the slightest bit of delay or pause. As soon as it rushed out of the wormhole, it determined this direction and rushed straight in. As a result, the 2 million battleships were instantly crushed. Walala, boom, boom. Amidst the clanging of the chains, a series of heaven-shaking explosions rang out. The massive nether furnace turned into a black streak of light that slammed into the 2 million warships. In an instant, flames soared into the sky. All the battleships that were hit by the netherworld cauldron or hit by the rune chains that were waving like spirit snakes outside the cauldron walls, regardless of whether they were large or small, were all like paper paste, exploding at the first moment. It suddenly exploded. This scene was as easy as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. After the bloody plundering in the demon territory of the first universe not long ago, the netherworld furnace had hibernated and completed this evolution. Its power had obviously become stronger because of the transformation of the artifact's spirit. A large fortress with a diameter of 100,000 meters, when hit by the rune chains outside the cauldron walls, was directly shattered into a large piece of starry sky alloy without any suspense. Its momentum was simply unstoppable. 2 million battleships were spread out in the void. It could be said to be a vast expanse that almost extended to the end of the line of sight. But at this moment, they couldn't even hold on for half an incense stick's time. As the netherworld furnace shot forward, in the center of this huge starship army, a starry sky passage full of blood and fire was forcibly plowed out. It also spread all the way to the end of the line of sight. In a short time, at least 700,000 of the 2 million starships of various types were destroyed. Even the 1,200,000 starships that survived were only able to escape because the netherworld furnace didn't have the heart to fight at all and didn't bother to pay attention to them. It only focused on charging straight ahead. When the experts of various races in the second universe and the star fortresses and fortresses around the void came to themselves, the netherworld furnace that suddenly appeared had turned into a streak of black light and disappeared into the horizon. And that direction was exactly where the space zone of Shadow Devil was located. This couldn't be a coincidence. The netherworld furnace had suddenly appeared in the second universe because of the mysterious primordial world in the space zone of Shadow Devil. This news made everyone's hearts sink. In fact, with the sudden arrival of the netherworld furnace, they had already realized that the secret of the mysterious primordial world in the space zone of Shadow Devil could no longer be hidden. The races of the first universe and the human race of the third universe, as well as the experts and the army of the Council of Elders of the Wanluo Federation, would soon arrive. But even so, the situation wasn't actually the worst. After all, it would take time for the armies of the other 2 universes to gather. Moreover, they had traveled across universes. By the time the armies of various races entered the second universe through wormholes, the second main force of the races of the second universe would have at least entered the mysterious primordial world. It had been 2 or 3 days since the primordial world. 2 or 3 days was enough for them to plunder a large amount of resources. They had finally seized an opportunity. But now, after knowing that even the netherworld furnace had come for that mysterious, desolate ancient world, the last trace of wishful thinking in everyone's heart had completely disappeared at this moment. Although the second main force of the races of the second universe had basically finished gathering and could set off at any time to enter the mysterious primordial world, they hadn't set off yet, had they? The netherworld furnace, on the other hand, had already arrived. In less than half an hour, it had destroyed almost 1,000,000 starships of various types, unstoppably before it turned into a streak of blackness and disappeared at the end of everyone's sight. At this speed, the netherworld furnace would arrive at the space zone of Shadow Devil, where the entrance to the mysterious primordial world was located in at most the time of a meal. Then, it would rush into it without any delay. With the netherworld furnace's ferocity and appetite, even if they followed it into the primordial world, they would at most eat some bones and drink some soup. Chapter 4156. Damn it, what the hell happened? How did the news leak out? And the netherworld furnace in the first universe knows about it. That's a big deal. It shouldn't be because the news leaked out. Otherwise, if the netherworld furnace got the news, how could the races in the first universe and the human race in the third universe and the Wan Luo Federation not do anything? That's right. The existence behind the netherworld furnace is suspected to be the great path of the primitive era, which is closely related to the primitive world. It must have sensed something in a way that we don't know, and that's why it came here directly from the first universe. It's useless to talk about this. Now, the netherworld furnace is on its way to the domain of Shadow Devil, and it will enter the mysterious desolate world in a few minutes. Inform our races immediately. The second main force will set off immediately. Even if we eat all the food, we will not be satisfied. Evacuate. Evacuate immediately. It's meaningless to stay here. The netherworld furnace has arrived. It's impossible that the races in the other two universes have not been alarmed. Their armies will be here soon. As the netherworld cauldron floated away, the 6 imperishable old monsters jumped and roared in the void. In the end, outside the plane-level wormhole leading to the second universe, nearly 10 million battleships of various types all opened their kinetic energy cabins. Rumbling sounds echoed throughout the entire void. Because of the lack of time, they even ignored the 1,000,000 damaged starships that were still rumbling in the void now and then. All the starships followed the flagship fortresses of their respective clans and marched toward the ancestral land of their clans at the highest speed. They were one of the members of the second main force of the various clans that were about to head to the mysterious primordial world. No one was willing to easily miss such a fortuitous encounter and fortune. 2 hours later, the nearly 10 million troops stationed outside the plane-level wormhole leading to the first universe had left. Even the other 10 million troops stationed outside the plane-level wormhole leading to the third universe, which was tens of millions of miles away, had completely evacuated after receiving the news. At these two wormholes, except for the one in front of them, there were nearly 1,000,000 battleships of various types left in the void, which were still steaming. Except for the blazing flames, there were no more battleships left. At this time, the experts from the other two universes who followed the netherworld furnace finally arrived. Swish! Swish, swish, swish. Faint sounds of breaking through the air rang out. From the two wormholes that were separated by tens of millions of miles, more than a dozen figures rushed out one after another. All of them were immortal old monsters. They came from the two camps of a human clan, the Myriad Luo Federation and the First Universe, which included the Hell Ant Clan and the Space Rat Clan. Various clans. As for what was happening here, the group of Undyings who had rushed over had no idea at all. However, due to the sudden change in the netherworld furnace, they more or less had their own speculations. At this moment, those who had just rushed out of the wormhole suddenly looked up and saw nearly 1,000,000 starry sky battleships in front of them. These immortal old monsters from different races and forces were stunned for a moment, and then they were all shocked. Soon, a soft voice filled with suspicion rang out. Hiss! What happened here? Looking at the marks on the battleships, they should have been destroyed by brute force. There are also some that were forcefully cut open by a blunt object. It matches the marks of the rune chains on the outer wall of the Netherworld Furnace. This is clearly the work of the Netherworld Furnace. But why is there an army of 1,000,000 starships here? Are the races of the Second Universe having a civil war? At this time, they shouldn't have gathered such a large army, and it just so happens that they are right in front of the plane-level wormhole that leads to the first universe. No, there are also traces of energy in the void near the plane-level wormhole that leads to the third universe. At least an army of 10 million has gathered here, and it has been less than 6 hours since they left. The two plane-level wormholes that lead to other universes are heavily guarded. What are the races of the second universe doing? Soon, as these soft exclamations rang out, the immortal old monsters who had roughly figured out the situation became even more suspicious. Originally, they had quietly crossed the dimensions to come here, and there were so many of them. For the races of the second universe, this matter was too sensitive. If they spread out their soul consciousness to investigate without any scruples, it would be really inappropriate. If they did so, it was very likely that the immortal old monsters of the top 10 races of the second universe would be alarmed and cause unnecessary misunderstandings. However, the clues that they had found were too suspicious. If they didn't get to the bottom of this matter, no one would be able to feel at ease. Therefore, after the soft exclamation stopped, a group of nearly 20 immortal old monsters from various races and top forces of the two universes exchanged glances with each other and quickly reached a consensus. No matter what, they had to find out the truth and figure out what was going on in the second universe. What was going on? Even if it would cause the immortal old monsters of the top 10 races of the second universe to misunderstand, they would not hesitate. After making the decision, the nearly 20 immortal old monsters no longer hesitated. They immediately spread out their soul consciousness and extended it forward. A circle of invisible soul consciousness rippled out in an instant. In just a short breath, it had already enveloped an extremely vast area of the void of the universe. The immortal old monster's soul consciousness was very strong. Even if it couldn't cover an entire universe, it had no problem covering 1 or 2 star zones. Unfortunately, the domain of Shadow Devil, where the vast passageway leading to the mysterious Desolation world was located, happened to be not too far away from the two wormholes. It was only 1 star zone away. In fact, even the two armies of various races of the second universe that had just left the wormhole 2 hours ago were still within the range of the star zone in front of them. They hadn't gone too far. All of this fell into the eyes of the dozen or so immortal old monsters who had hurried over. They were all captured by the soul consciousness that they had spread out with all their strength. In the next instant, cries of alarm that were filled with extreme shock rang out one after another. Heavens, there is actually a vast starry sky passage in the direction of the domain of Shadow Devil. Inside the starry sky passage is clearly a mysterious desolation world that has no end. The Netherworld Furnace has just rushed in. I understand now. No wonder the Netherworld Furnace came here. There's a great opportunity here. The races of the second universe have stationed 2 armies of 10 million battleships to guard the exit of the wormhole. Chapter 41-57. After a series of angry roars, the group of Immortal Realm old monsters, who had learned the truth, retreated immediately. They all turned around and rushed into the planar wormholes behind them, returning to their respective clans and forces to report the news. However, only one of the races and forces that had sent 2 Immortal Realm experts to the Myriad Luo Federation returned. The other Immortal Realm expert rushed to the spacious space tunnel in the Shadow Devil star zone of the second universe without hesitation and entered that place at once. The mysterious desolate world. Since then, the news of the arrival of a mysterious desolate world in the second universe had been completely leaked. Everyone in the 3 universes knew about it, and the 3 universes moved together. Countless races and forces, big and small, were all boiling with excitement. The moment they received the news, they issued a clan order to mobilize urgently. The first universe, except for the demon race, which had never shown up since the second generation of the demon race, took them away with a ray of light when the Demon Emperor star had undergone a shocking change. All the other races started to mobilize like crazy. A large number of spaceships, fortresses, and fortresses of various sizes were gathered together. The other three races of the Alliance of the Four Races, namely the Hell Ant race, the Space Rat race, and the Giant Ferocious race, had gathered an army of 10 million spaceships in just one day. They were heading to the Giant Ferocious race, which was the closest to the Demon race. After the army of 10 million was gathered, it would be led by the 6 Immortal Realm Old Monsters sent by the 3 races to the frontier of the Demon race. They would rush to the second universe through the plane-level wormhole that led to the first universe. In addition, the Myriad Race Alliance, which was formed by the former slave races of the first universe, was also gathering an army quickly. All the races, which had a total of more than 20 million, were gathering at the edge of the Demon Race Star Zone near the central area of the first universe. The commanders of the Myriad Race Alliance this time were 10 Immortal Realm Old Monsters from the various races of the Alliance. At the same time, while the army of the races of the first universe was gathering, the 2 camps of the human race and the Myriad Luo Federation in the third universe were doing the same. They were gathering their forces and deploying their troops in an orderly manner. The Myriad Luo Federation Senate was the fastest. On the second day after the news came from the second universe, an army of 10 million spaceships was gathered at the station planets of the Federation military in the Undying Star Zone of the Demon Race Star Zone. They headed for the Tomb of the Fallen Star Zone immediately. The Federation fleet, which had 10 million spaceships, was led by 5 Immortal Realm Old Monsters. Of the Tomb of the Human Race of the Human Race, of the Human of the Demon Race of the Human Race of the Human Race of Long Shantang. He was familiar with Xian, and he was also part of the fleet. As for the human clans Tenju, Celestial Palace, there were 6 Immortal Realm Old Monsters, including Gong Huaji, and the strongest one was Elder Gong Su Ho of Tianju, Celestial Palace. 10 Extreme Celestial Palace dispatched an army of 10 million spaceships and battleships. Since the territory controlled by the Self-Cultivator camp was further away from the Tomb of the Fallen Star Zone, it had already been 10 million Immortal Realm days. The army of 10 million Immortal Realm Old Monsters had just entered the territory of the Science and Technology camp when the army of Heaven Extreme Celestial Palace had just set off for the Tomb of the Fallen Star Zone. 2 days later, the first fleet of the Federation arrived in the domain of the graveyard of the Domain of the Falling Stars. After entering the depths of the Domain of the Falling Stars, they rushed directly into the plane-level wormhole that led to the second universe. Half a day later, the immortal army that was chasing after them arrived. They followed closely behind and rushed into the wormhole. Soon, they disappeared. The army of Heaven Extreme Celestial Palace that had come from afar entered the wormhole 2 days later. At this point, the army of 30 million spaceships gathered by the 2 human camps and the Myriad Luo Federation in the third universe, as well as the 16 Immortal Realm Old Monsters, including the 3 Marquises, had all left this realm and embarked on their journey to the second universe. In addition to these 3 top forces, there were many weaker sects, families, and forces in the third universe. Even rogue cultivators had flocked to the second universe from various star zones in the past few days. After arriving in the Tomb of the Fallen Star Zone, they directly entered the wormhole and rushed to the second universe. It was because this opportunity was too tempting. Everyone wanted to go and try their luck. Who knows, they might be able to come across a great opportunity. The second universe. It had been 3 days since the Netherworld Furnace had arrived from the first universe without any warning. The Netherworld Furnace, which was as powerful as crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood, had passed through the spacious starry passage in the domain of Shadow Devil and entered the mysterious desolate world inside the passage. Following the Netherworld Furnace were several Immortal Realm Old Monsters from various races in the first universe and the third universe, as well as the Myriad Luo Federation Senate. After that, various races in the second universe, who were shocked by what had happened, swarmed into action. Except for the Netherworld Tortoise clan, which had been completely sealed off. The other 9 races in the top 10, as well as some other races that were ranked higher, each sent one or more immortal realm monsters out of their ancestral lands. They all rushed into the mysterious desolate world one after another. As for the second batch of spaceships that had been gathered in these races, they basically all set off the next day and followed the first batch of spaceships into the mysterious desolate world. However, because the overall strength of the races in the second universe was uneven, the number of spaceships that entered the mysterious desolate world varied. For example, the races in the top 10, such as the Blood Flood Dragon clan, had all gathered an army of more than 5 million spaceships. Even the smaller ones maintained a scale of more than 1 million. The total number of spaceships gathered by all the races in the second universe was more than 70 to 80 million. It was not all of them, but it was more or less the same. Counting in such a way, in just a few days, the total number of starships of all kinds gathered by the major clans and forces in the 3 main planes of the universe had reached a terrifying scale of almost 200 million. It was definitely an astounding number. In the past tens of thousands of years, such a situation had never happened before. Chapter 4158. By the time Xianxia arrived at the Shadow Devil Galaxy of Universe 2 with his plane-level interstellar coordinate jump ability, there were already many battleships from various races of Universe 2 shuttling back and forth in space outside the mysterious primordial world, patrolling the area. However, this starry passage was simply too vast. It was more than 20 million kilometers away. After Xianxia activated the perfect vibration of his mental energy secret technique, he was able to easily sneak in without anyone noticing. After entering the mysterious primordial world, an extremely familiar aura of the primordial world immediately assaulted his senses. Xianxia was not in a hurry to go deeper. Instead, he remained in a concealed state as he observed and explored the outer regions. From the outside, the starry passage leading into the mysterious primordial world looked like a giant cosmic black hole. The primordial world inside the black hole was obviously extremely deep, with no end in sight. After entering, the feeling of being deep and distant grew even stronger. Almost as soon as he entered, Xianxia was more or less certain of one thing. This mysterious primordial world was very likely the core star region of the great battle of the primordial world. At the very least, it was extremely close. This was because even in the outer regions of this fragment of the primordial world, there were a large number of corpses of primordial beasts that he had never seen before floating in the void. Golden griffins, blue-eyed golden eagles, 9-tailed coxcomb snakes, 3-headed bone serpents, red phosphorus twin-tailed serpents, blood moon wolves, dark purple star wolves, yellow lightning wolves, amethyst behemoths, 5-color divine oxen, gold moon shrew toads, blood jade spiders, 6-winged heavenly demonic insects, blue-eyed golden-eyed beasts, blood-eyed demonic apes, purgatory blood phoenixes, purple gold beasts, dragon pythons. Wait a minute. It was safe to say that all kinds of bizarre primordial species, birds, and beasts that had long been unseen in the current era could be found here. It was too much for the eye to take in. He even saw a slender silver dragon. Its body was thin and slender, and it was at least 1 million meters long. Its slender tail looked like a long whip, and there was a pair of ferocious horns behind its jaw and behind its eyes. Its wings could reflect light like mirrors, giving off a metallic texture. There was also a black dragon. Its body was so huge that it was even bigger than the silver dragon that was 1 million meters long. It was over 200,000 feet long. His terrifyingly enormous dragon body was covered in solid, black, metallic scales that did not pass through any light. He also had a pair of pupils that were as black as almonds, and countless brilliant golden threads that were thinner than hair were embedded in his dark irises. Judging from their auras, the silver dragon and black dragon were clearly supreme existences of the primordial era. Their battle prowess was second only to the golden divine dragon, the void tortoise, and the primordial Wuxia. Even the corpses of the fallen primordial grand cultivators could be seen. How could it be at the edge of the great battle in the past? According to this inference, if everything was true, it was very likely that there was an even greater surprise and fortune in the depths of this collapsed corner of the ancient world. However, Yixian did not immediately leave to explore. He decided to collect as many corpses of the primordial grand cultivators that were lying in the void in the peripheral area first. Then he would go deeper. This matter had to be done cleverly. After all, even outside the Starry Sky Passage, one could vaguely see the general situation of the shattered world inside the black hole through the vast passage that looked like a giant black hole. If Yixian collected all the corpses of the primordial grand cultivators in the void, it would definitely attract attention, and he would probably be exposed. In fact, long before he arrived, the various races of the Second Universe had each sent a fleet to explore this place. The commanders were basically all Immortal Realm old monsters. Right now, they were scattered in the peripheral area, trying to collect the corpses of the primordial grand cultivators lying in the void. If Yixian's actions were too obvious, he would be discovered at the first possible moment. Although he wasn't afraid, his original plan to hide in the dark and silently make a fortune would probably die prematurely. The depth of this desolate ancient world fragment was unknown, but the diameter or width of its periphery was about 400 to 500 million miles. Not every part of the boundless periphery was full of corpses of the primordial grand cultivators. All in all, the corpses of the primordial grand cultivators were mostly concentrated in the central area of the periphery. There were also corpses on the edges, but they were sparse and not dense. Also, the corpses of the primordial grand cultivators at the edges of the periphery were much weaker. Their auras were clearly weaker. Yixian's goal was to find the remains of the primordial life treasure that were located in the center of the outer region, within a radius of 100 million kilometers. Of course, he couldn't take them all away. He could only choose the larger ones with stronger auras and move them away. There were around 2 million corpses of the primordial grand cultivators in the central area. Judging from their auras, the weakest of them were Star Lords, and the strongest were primordial grand cultivators. As for the primordial grand cultivators like the Golden Divine Dragon, Yixian didn't see any of them. Even if there were, they should be further ahead. As a matter of fact, there weren't too many corpses of the primordial grand cultivators. After a quick glance, Yixian estimated that there were around 300 corpses. 300 corpses was indeed a small proportion compared to the total number of corpses of the primordial grand cultivators. However, the corpses of the primordial grand cultivators were too valuable. It was already surprising that there were more than 300 of them. After all, the corpses of such treasures in Yixian's possession, including those obtained from the mysterious void where the void tortoise was hibernating, only amounted to 13 primordial sovereigns, more than 200 primordial sovereigns, and more than 200 primordial sovereigns and below. There were less than 500 corpses of the primordial grand cultivators above the immortal level. This time, the target that Yixian had chosen was also at the immortal realm. He couldn't be bothered to collect those below the immortal realm. And even if he did, he would only be able to fill the stomachs of the primordial turtle and the primordial porcupine and the other foodies. Although his strength had soared recently, and his original body had reached the universe level 1, it was obviously impossible for him to collect the corpses of those above the immortal level with his own strength. As for the corpses of the emperors, and primordial grand cultivators, it was needless to say. Just getting close to them would probably cause him to explode from the terrifying pressure. Chapter 4159. Yixian's spiritual energy was perfectly vibrating, and his level had already reached the advanced level. His personal strength had also reached the universe grade. Under such circumstances, after he used this secret technique, ordinary undyings who were only one level higher than him couldn't detect him at all. There were no traces at all. Only marquee level undyings would be able to detect him if they investigated carefully. At this moment, although there were more than a dozen undyings in this desolate ancient fragment, there wasn't a single marquee level undyings. But even so, Yixian didn't plan on picking an obvious target from the very beginning. Instead, he quietly circled around to a less conspicuous area and started with the remains of the Immortal Realm treasure. With a thought, he secretly took away one of them and sent it into the Shin cauldron within his body. Instantly, after that, he carefully made a few moves to test the power of the Shin cauldron in his body. He used the method of telekinesis to take these undyings away, and the furthest he could go. After attacking more than 10 times, Yixian had a rough idea of what was going on. With such a method of telekinesis, the furthest distance he could maintain between him and the target was obviously affected by the target's cultivation level and was not constant. The stronger the energy of the undyings, the closer the distance he had to maintain in order to successfully take them away. Otherwise, if he was too far away, he wouldn't be able to move them at all. The furthest distance he could maintain when taking an undyings was about 10,000 miles. Marquis level undyings were about 9,000 miles. Emperor level undyings were 8,000 miles. Emperor level undyings were 7,000 miles. Emperor level undyings were 6,000 miles. As for what was above Emperor level, Yixian didn't know at all. However, for those undyings that were stronger than Emperor level undyings but weren't that strong, he could take them away with telekinesis. The furthest distance he could maintain was about 5,000 miles. As for the remains of the Supreme Being of the Primordial Era, if Yixian wanted to collect them, even if he fully activated the domain power of the Shin cauldron within his body, he would only be able to succeed within 1,000 miles of his target. After confirming the furthest distance to absorb the corpses of the various levels of treasures, Yixian took a deep breath. Without any hesitation, he began to wantonly plunder them. Often, in the blink of an eye, the remains of a certain primordial life treasure that was originally floating in the air were quietly taken away by him and sent into the undying world within his body. Inside the Shin cauldron, at first, he only collected the corpses of the 5 Immortal Realm warriors and made a fortune silently. In less than half a day, he had collected more than 1,000 corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors. More than 1,000 corpses of the 5 great realms of the Immortal Realm were a tremendous amount of top-grade flesh and blood. It sounded like a lot, but it was nothing compared to the nearly 2 million corpses in the Central Territory. As long as they were collected in a staggered manner, they wouldn't show their worth, because it was very difficult to be detected. Since the progress was so smooth, Yixian gradually relaxed and began to look at the corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors in the void. There were only about 300 corpses of this level of Immortal Realm warriors, and they were all extremely large in size. Compared to the corpses of the other levels, they were obviously more eye-catching. If they were so large, they would disappear just like that. If they weren't careful, they would be very likely to be discovered by the exploration fleets of the various races in the Second Universe wandering around the void, especially those Immortal Realm warriors who were either guarding the fleets or wandering in the void. These guys were at a loss. They had been in this place for a few days, and there were so many corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors in front of them and in the surrounding void. However, from the beginning to the end, they could only collect the corpses of the Star Lord, Domain Lord, and Sector Lord warriors. Even the Immortal Realm warriors had a very low success rate in collecting the corpses of the ordinary Immortal Realm warriors. As for the corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors above the Immortal Realm warriors, no one had successfully collected a single one in the past few days. Not to mention the Immortal Realm warriors. Even the Immortal Realm warriors couldn't get too close to the corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors. The pressure was too strong, and there was the danger of exploding. There was a treasure mountain in front of them, but they could only look on anxiously. Encountering such a situation was already frustrating enough. Under such circumstances, if they found out that Yixian easily collected the corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors, the Immortal Realm warriors present would probably be so angry. They might even vomit blood from anger. Among the 300 corpses of the Immortal Realm warriors, the 2 silver dragons and the black dragon were the largest. They were shining brightly and were too eye-catching. Although Yixian was moved and even envious, he didn't dare to make a move, at least not now. After thinking for a while, he chose a bloodjade spider of the Immortal Realm warrior level as his first target. The main reason was that its body was slightly smaller, only about 100 zhang in size. It wasn't too eye-catching, so the risk was almost zero. Relying on the protection of the farmer god Cauldron's domain, Yixian carefully approached the blood jade spider within 1,000 li of the blood jade spider's corpse. After looking around and confirming that there weren't any immortal realm warriors paying attention to this area, he activated the farmer god Cauldron's domain with all his strength. After locking onto the blood jade spider, he quickly took action and directly collected it. The whole process was completed in a short tenth of a breath's time. Because of the farmer god Cauldron's domain, this blood jade spider disappeared into thin air without leaving any traces. It was directly sent into the treasure cauldron in Yixian's undying world. After a successful attempt, Yixian's spirit was greatly boosted. Needless to say, this sort of feeling was truly extraordinarily wonderful. Just like this, under the eyes of a group of Eternal Realm old monsters, he silently took away the treasures that they wanted but couldn't obtain, and he was even able to enjoy their extremely anxious yet helpless embarrassment. This matter wasn't just exciting, it was also moving. Kuang Shini was so beautiful that she was practically bubbling. After that, Yixian attacked several times in succession. In a short few hours, he successfully collected the corpses of the golden moon shrew toad, the blood jade spider, the six-winged heavenly demon insect, and hundreds of other treasures of the primordial era. Of course, these were all relatively small existences, under 1,000 zhang in size, so no accidents happened. Unknowingly, there were only 300 or so immortal realm warriors' corpses in the void, and more than a third of them were collected by him. However, at this time, there were no more small targets. This also meant that the next collection would be much more risky. Chapter 4160. For the next day or so, Yixian had been wantonly collecting the remains of various primordial creatures. Including the previous harvest, after 1.5 days, he had collected more than 10,000 remains of primordial creatures in the Shunnong Cauldron, and all of them were above the immortal rank. Among them, there were more than 200 remains of primordial powerful beings. In total, there were more than 300 remains of primordial powerful beings. Among them, the small ones below 10,000 feet and the medium ones between 10,000 feet to 10,000 feet had all been collected by him. Now, there were only a few hundred remains of the primordial powerful beings that were more than 10,000 feet in size. In the central region of the outer region, there were a total of more than 2 million remains of various types. Yixian collected more than 10,000 of them. It sounded like a lot, but in reality, it was only less than 1% of the total. Moreover, Yixian was staggered in his collection and did not focus on one area. In addition, the vanguard exploration fleets of the various races of the Second Universe that had entered this place had been busy collecting some Star Lord, Domain Lord, and even Sector Lord level targets. The number of treasure body remains in the void had been slowly decreasing, so his movements weren't seen through. Of course, this was also because he had always adhered to the principle of being cautious. Otherwise, no matter how few remains he collected, he would have been exposed long ago. Right now, more than 10,000 corpses of treasures above the immortal rank had been successfully collected, and Yixian had chosen the most valuable one. Even though there were still a lot of corpses in the air, most of them were existences below the immortal rank, so he didn't have much interest in them. After some consideration, he decided to collect the last few hundred remains of the primordial powerful beings that were more than 10,000 feet in size. Then, he left the outer region and entered deeper into the void of the primordial world fragment to look for other fortunes and opportunities. Although there were only a little over 100 of them left, they were all large treasured corpses that were over 100,000 feet in size. Once he collected them, the risk factor was so high that it even surpassed the sum of the 10,000 treasure corpses he had collected before. Realizing this, Yixian became even more careful. Not long after, he chose his target and immediately approached it quietly, maintaining a distance of less than 1,000 miles from his target. This time, his target was a purgatory blood phoenix. Although it could not be compared to the silver dragon and black dragon that were 100,000 feet and 200,000 feet in size, its size was not small. It was more than 30,000 feet, which was equivalent to 100,000 meters, which was equivalent to a starry sky fortress. If such a big fellow suddenly disappeared, the possibility of being detected was very high. In order to ensure that nothing went wrong, Xian waited for an entire meal before instantly making his move at a perfect time. He activated the power of the Shinong Cauldron's internal domain and stored the Purgatory Blood Phoenix into the cauldron in the blink of an eye. As soon as all this was completed, in a void that was only hundreds of thousands of miles away from him, an immortal old monster from an unknown clan in the second universe seemed to have sensed something. He subconsciously turned his head and glanced at the area where Xian was. Fortunately, it was a close call. This immortal old monster might have sensed something, but it was obviously very weak and hazy. After turning his head and glancing at this side, he quickly moved his eyes away. He did not investigate carefully, nor did he notice that there was a Purgatory Blood Phoenix's remains that were missing from the primordial powerful beings. With a long sigh of relief, Xian felt lucky. He quickly changed to another area and approached the second target more carefully. In this way, another day passed in the blink of an eye. At the same time, he had collected more than 10,000 remains of various creatures from the primordial era. But in the following day, he had successfully collected and sent into the internal space of the Shinong Cauldron. But there were only less than 30 remains of powerful beings from the primordial era. Compared with the two, the efficiency was simply too low. But fortunately, everything went smoothly. Until now, Xian's actions had not been detected by any immortal old monster. However, even Xian knew that it was only a matter of time before he was discovered, and it was basically coming. After all, in the central area of this area, there were only about 300 powerful beings from the primordial era. Now, the number had been sharply reduced to only about 70. If such a strange situation was not discovered, it would be really strange. In fact, if it weren't for the fact that there were only about a dozen immortal old monsters in the surrounding void, and that they basically did not rush around in the past 2.5 days. Instead, they stayed close to the remains of a powerful being from the primordial era or a quasi-primordial era. They were concentrating on deducing and trying various methods to collect the remains. The inexplicable disappearance of more than 200 powerful beings from the primordial era had probably been discovered long ago. After a short while, Xian came to the remains of a powerful being from the primordial era, a golden griffin. After waiting for more than 2 hours, when the time came, he immediately took action again without hesitation. In the blink of an eye, he had successfully collected the golden griffin into his body, the Shinong Cauldron. However, this time, the expected exposure had finally arrived. Just as Xian took action to collect the golden griffin, in a void millions of miles away from where he was, an immortal old monster happened to turn his head and look in this direction. He happened to see the strange scene of the golden griffin disappearing into thin air. Facing such a strange scene, this immortal old monster with a lion-like nose obviously felt a little confused. He even raised his hand to rub his eyes. Finally, when he fixed his eyes and confirmed that the golden griffin had really disappeared, he realized that something big had happened. His expression changed, and he turned his head to look in other directions in the void this time. The lion-nosed immortal old monster was so shocked that his body trembled several times, and the expression on his face changed continuously. In less than half a breath, his face was as black as ink. In his mouth, there was a roar full of indignation and dissatisfaction. He suddenly howled, "Damn it, in just a day or two, how come there are only 70 or so remains of the more than 300 powerful beings from the primordial era in the void? Who did it? Eating alone without a word, such an appetite, big, such a vicious mouth, this is not a F***king thing." As this thunderous roar suddenly sounded, more than a dozen immortal old monsters, who were guarding the remains of a treasure in the distance, carefully studying and deducing the collection strategy, were suddenly alarmed. With a suspicious look on their faces, they turned their heads to look, and then they were slightly confused. Chapter 4161. With the roars and roars coming from all directions in the void, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat. He quickly retreated, leaving the place where the golden griffin he had just collected was originally located. Almost in the next moment, the powerful divine senses of more than a dozen immortal old monsters covered the sky and earth. It was as if they were sweeping through this corner of the void, constantly probing and searching. Although Yi Xian was sure that with his current cultivation strength, he would definitely not be detected by the ordinary immortal old monsters who were only one realm higher than him by activating the high-level perfect vibration of the spiritual power secret technique. But now, after all, there were more than a dozen immortal old monsters' powerful divine senses sweeping over at the same time. If there was a mistake, there would be no way to recover. With this cautious thought, Yi Xian retreated for more than 10 million miles before he stopped in relief. His face darkened, and he looked at the lion-nosed immortal old monster who had roared first. Although he had long known that the risk factor of every move he made would continue to increase, it was only a matter of time before he was finally exposed. But even so, when he was really exposed by the lion-nosed immortal old monster, Yi Xian couldn't help but feel very unhappy. It could even be said that he was so depressed that he was almost angry. It was all this red-headed, big-nosed old man's fault. Otherwise, he could have collected more than 10 or 20 corpses before he was exposed. But now this matter had been exposed. The remaining 70 or so corpses of the primordial old monsters that he hadn't collected in time would definitely be firmly held by the dozen immortal old monsters. If he wanted to make a move again, not only would the success rate plummet, but even the risk of being caught on the spot and exposed would instantly soar by countless times. After all, his perfect vibration of the spiritual power secret technique only perfectly concealed all the aura and traces of existence of Yi Xian. Although it couldn't be detected, he still existed. There were more than 10 immortal old monsters here. If they really found his approximate location, they would surround him and surround him. There were people surrounding him, and it was extremely likely that they would be able to find Yi Xian. It could be said that in this situation, the last 70 or so primordial supreme being level corpses were no longer suitable to be used. Once they reached out, there was at least a 40% chance that they would be surrounded. Thinking of this, Yi Xian immediately felt dejected, and a strong sense of unwillingness rose in his heart. These were the remains of top treasures from the primordial era. Each of them was a priceless treasure. Moreover, it wasn't just one or two of them, but more than 70 of them. Giving them up like this would cause him great heartache. After pondering for a while, Yi Xian's mind suddenly flashed with a bright light. A bold idea gradually emerged in his mind. Out of caution, he forcefully suppressed the excitement in his heart and calmed his state of mind. He carefully deduced for a while before finally confirming that this method was feasible, and his spirits were instantly refreshed. Old man, who told you to ruin this Star-Lord's good deed? You asked for it, so don't blame the Star-Lord for being so insidious. As he inwardly cursed, Yi Xian turned around and looked towards the void that was thousands of kilometers to the right. His gaze fell onto the lion-nosed immortal who had ruined his plans. As he sized him up, a mischievous smile slowly appeared on the corner of his mouth, and it became more and more intense. As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian's figure flashed once more, avoiding the 10 or so immortal realm old monsters that were roaring and roaring in the surrounding space. He took a big circle and quickly approached the lion-nosed immortal realm old monster. After a while, when he stopped again, he was already behind the lion-nosed undying, about 7,000 miles away. Afterwards, Yi Xian's gaze passed by the back of the lion-nosed immortal and landed on the remains of a treasure body 6 to 700 kilometers in front of him. As for the aura of this treasure body, it was at the level of an immortal emperor. If Yi Xian activated the domain of the Shun-known cauldron within him to absorb the emperor-level treasure body into the cauldron space, he had to ensure that the distance between him and the target was no more than 8,000 miles. Right now, he was coincidentally within that distance, 7,000 miles. He could successfully absorb the treasure and also increase the distance between him and the lion-nosed undying. The moment he made a move, the chances of him successfully retreating from this area would be maximized. Right now, the 10 undying in this space fragment were all from the various races of the second universe. It was inevitable for them to be suspicious of each other. And they were all normal undyings. They could only absorb normal undyings, and the success rate wasn't very high. As for higher-level treasures, not to mention Emperor-level undyings, even official-level undyings couldn't be absorbed. Previously, these dozen or so immortal realm old monsters had all been guarding the remains of a high-level treasure. They were focused on deducing and experimenting with all sorts of methods in order to find a way to collect a higher-level target. If not for that, they wouldn't have only noticed Yi Xian's actions at this moment. What Yi Xian needed to do now was to take away the remains of the immortal Emperor-rank treasure that was several hundred kilometers in front of this lion-nosed immortal. And to do so, he had to do it openly. Simply put, the moment the target was absorbed and the moment it shot towards the lion-nosed undying, he had to intentionally reveal a flaw in the domain of the Shen-known cauldron, allowing the other 10 undyings to see through it. The undyings could clearly see through it. Afterwards, when the target passed by the lion-nosed immortal's body and shot towards Yi Xian's location, he quickly concealed this flaw that he had intentionally revealed. If he did that, the other 10 undyings in the surrounding space would only see the Emperor-level treasure body flying towards the lion-nosed undying and disappearing right in front of him. However, they wouldn't be able to see the trajectory of the treasure body flying towards Yi Xian and being absorbed into the Shen-known cauldron within him. With one look, it was obvious that the corpse had been taken away by the lion-nosed undying. This was the remains of an undying Emperor-level treasure. None of the other undying old monsters could move it, but only he could do it. Just this alone was enough to make the other undying old monsters think of many things. For example, if he could absorb an Emperor-level undyings, why couldn't he absorb a Desolate-level undyings? This was clearly because he had some sort of secret technique, or had some sort of special treasure. Once this thought appeared in the bottom of his heart, even if he didn't have any strong evidence, it was impossible for him to easily dispel it in a short time. In short, this big black pot was definitely going to be the lion-nosed immortal. The more than 200 corpses of the primordial almighty treasures that had mysteriously disappeared would all be counted. Chapter 4162. At this moment, after Yi Xian secretly made a move, he quickly left and dodged to the distance in another direction. In the space around the lion-nosed immortal, angry roars and roars instantly sounded out. The dozen or so undying beings from the various races of the second universe roared and charged at the lion-nosed undying being, who had a stunned expression on his face. "Old lion monster, you are really generous. You actually hid it from all of us." "That's right. It's fortunate that you were the first one to notice the abnormality. After all this time, it turns out that it was a thief crying thief. If it weren't for the fact that I was itching to make a move and was caught red-handed, we would have been fooled by you. You're so greedy. You're so greedy. Old lion, tell us the secret method you use to collect the remains of the supreme primordial era treasures. Let's share it. In addition, the 200 or so remains of the supreme primordial era treasures you secretly collected must be taken out as well. Let's share them equally. Hurry up and take them out. Otherwise, don't blame me for turning against you. In the blink of an eye, more than a dozen immortal realm old monsters had approached. All of them were furious, and their eyes were extremely unfriendly. Some even said that they were extremely fierce. After all, they were all undying old monsters of their own races. When had they ever been fooled like this? Besides, the race behind the lion-nosed, undying old monster was not very powerful in the second universe. Although they were not ranked below the top 100, they were at the bottom of the top 100 races. At present, more than a dozen immortal realm old monsters were roaring, and half of them were from the top 10 of the second universe. Although they were all immortal realm cultivators, the strength of the clans behind them was deep, so they naturally had more confidence. The lion-nosed, undying old monster had no doubt that if he couldn't give them an explanation today, The dozens of undying old monsters would definitely attack him without hesitation. They might even tear him apart alive. Thinking of this, the lion-nosed, undying old monster was so shocked that he trembled and almost burst into tears. Friends, can't we just talk it out? This is really a *King misunderstanding. This old man is being wrongly accused. Hey, old lion, you're still trying to quibble with the evidence. That's right. I saw the remains of the undying old monster turn into a beam of light and rush toward you. It didn't disappear until it was right in front of you. If you didn't collect it, could it be that it chased after you automatically? Old lion monster, we saw this with our own eyes. Beside you, and even in the void far away, there was no second figure other than you. Under such circumstances, you still want to deny it? Do you really think we can be bullied? Roar. Don't talk nonsense with him. Since he doesn't know what's good for him, just suppress him. Everyone, let's attack him together. We don't have much time. We have to collect the remains in the void. Where? You. And let. Seeing that his explanation was useless, the lion-nosed, undying old monster wasn't stupid. He couldn't just stand there and wait to be suppressed. He saw that the undying old monsters were getting closer and closer. Not only did they not listen to his explanation, they even shouted the word suppress and kill. Such a scene made the lion-nosed, undying old monster's face turn pale. He didn't dare to stay any longer. He turned around and started to escape. In such a situation, he had no choice but to escape. Being the scapegoat was better than being suppressed and losing his life, right? In this way, the super big black pot that had just been put on his head was undoubtedly confirmed. The dozen or so immortal realm old monsters that were swarming in the void were completely furious. While chasing in the void, they kept roaring, and the entire void of the universe was slightly trembling. 10 immortal realm old monsters who were swarming in the void were completely enraged. The consequences of several undying old monsters going berserk at the same time were very serious. If they didn't handle it well, the void would collapse. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact, it only took a few breaths of time. In this vast void, in addition to the dozen or so immortal realm old monsters from the various races of the second universe, there were also dozens of vanguard exploration fleets of various races. The scale was not small. These starships and more powerful beings of various races were busy collecting the remains of the Cosmic Lord, Domain Lord, and Sector Lord treasures in the void. At this moment, the sudden change of events made the space tremble with the roars of more than a dozen immortal realm old monsters. All of them were startled and fled in all directions, trying to avoid the immortal realm old monsters who were chasing and escaping in circles. They didn't want to be caught in the crossfire. In the blink of an eye, the entire universe was in chaos. However, not all the undying beings were convinced that the lion-nosed undying being was the culprit. Among the 10 or so undying beings, 3 or 4 of them quickly regained their composure. Although they were still chasing the lion-nosed undying being, their roars and roars had disappeared. Instead, they were warning the lion-nosed undying being. The lion-nosed undying old monster and the other undying old monsters had calmed down. This wasn't the result that Xianxia wanted. If these undying old monsters really calmed down, he wouldn't have the chance to take the remaining 70 or so undying old monster corpses. Thinking of this, Xianxia didn't hesitate any longer. His figure dashed out, and while carefully maintaining a perfect concealment of his aura, he quickly approached an area that was only 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers away from the lion-nosed immortal. He hung around him like a tail, waiting for an opportunity to attack again. Soon the chance came. At this moment, the undying old monster's words seemed to have worked. The other undying old monsters who were chasing the lion-nosed undying old monsters all slowed down after a slight hesitation. Seeing this, the lion-nosed undying old monster who was running away let out a sigh of relief. He paused and stopped. He looked around and quickly chose an undying old monster corpse that was about 100 miles away. Fellow friends, let me explain this matter slowly. That body wasn't mine. I've been wronged. If you don't believe me, just look at it. Isn't that just an emperor body? I'll take it now and prove it. You'll know once you see. Just as he finished speaking, the lion-nosed, undying being had already made his move. His aura surged out from his body, and one could feel it even with their eyes closed. It was definitely not just for show. Seeing this, Xian grinned. He was waiting for the best chance, but he didn't expect the lion-nosed, undying old monster to be so considerate. Since he was so cooperative, if he didn't make a move now, it would be unreasonable. Chapter 4163. Silence. A deathly silence. Just a moment ago, the other dozen or so undying old monsters almost believed his words when they saw the lion-nosed, undying being speak so confidently and even prove it on the spot. At this moment, the remains of the Emperor Immortal turned into a ray of light as the lion-nosed Immortal waved his hand. The dozen or so immortal old monsters and even more immortal experts in the surrounding void all gaped in shock. Their mouths were agape. Everyone's face was filled with a sluggish expression in an instant, as if they had just been struck by lightning. Even the lion-nosed, undying himself was completely petrified, staring blankly at the right hand that was still raised, his mind rumbling non-stop. This time, Xian still removed the concealment effect of the field within the Shinnon cauldron from the moment the target was captured until the distance in front of the lion-nosed immortal cultivator's body. He purposely revealed a flaw so that everyone in the distant void could see it clearly. Immediately after, the instant the treasure body's remains arrived in front of the lion-nosed immortal, Xian quickly adjusted the power of the Shinnon cauldron's domain and concealed the flaws that he had intentionally revealed earlier. This scene was the focus of everyone's attention. Everyone in the space witnessed that this Emperor-level treasure body was easily taken away by the lion-nosed, undying in one move. Something's not right. Something's not right. Which bastard is trying to harm me? Come out now. I just raised my hand and you're up to no good. What kind of grudge do you have against me? Whoa, why are you targeting this old man? After being stunned for a while, the lion-nosed, undying regained his senses and his face turned green. He jumped and cursed while looking at the dozen or so undying old monsters in the distance. This time, he was really about to cry. He frowned as if he had just been hit by frost. Everyone, please don't be fooled by appearances. I'd try to take it away again, but I didn't succeed. What you saw wasn't done by me. You've gone too far. Old lion monster, if I don't kill you today, I won't rest. You've gone too far. You're treating me like a monkey. What's the point of wasting time with him? Let's do it, everyone. The moment the lion-nosed, undying finished, the dozen or so undyings in the distance all roared in anger. This time, even the ones who had advised both sides to stay calm were furious, gritting their teeth. Even though they didn't say anything, they were the first to charge out towards the lion-nosed, undying. We're finished. All our mouths are useless. Seeing this, the lion-nosed, undying almost crumbled on the spot. In despair, he didn't even have the will to explain himself. He turned and fled without another word. Rumble, rumble. After being toyed with and humiliated twice in a row, the undyings of various races who didn't know the truth felt as though their chests were about to explode. Even their pursuit this time was completely different from before. As they chased in space, they didn't hesitate to attack from time to time. Even if they were separated by a considerable distance, they would not hesitate to launch an energy bombardment, as if they only wanted to vent and enjoy themselves. This was clearly the rhythm of a complete rampage. More than 10 immortal old monsters, without exception, almost went crazy with anger. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Xian had already quickly retreated far away, not wanting to get close to this group of crazy chasing and escaping immortal realm old monsters. While they were busy in the west, Xian went to the east, specifically choosing a quiet place to settle down and fish in troubled waters. As long as no one was paying attention, he would immediately take action and quickly obtain a treasure body. Wreckage. Furthermore, every single one of them was of the desolation level, not even quasi-desolation level. He had already collected enough of them. Time passed by slowly. Soon, more than an hour had passed. During this period of time, The vast void in front of them was bustling with activity. More than a dozen Immortal Realm old monsters chased after them like crazy. However, the lion-nosed old monster was an Immortal Realm old monster after all, and the void was vast enough. It was obviously impossible to do anything to him in a short time. As for Xian, he was still waiting for the right opportunity to take action. Unbeknownst to him, half of the remaining 70 or so corpses of the primordial era were taken away by him. There were only a little more than 30 primordial era experts left in the void. Wait, fellow Taoists, please stop. It seems that half of the primordial era treasure body remains have disappeared. It wasn't until now that the rage had gotten to their heads. The undyings that had lost their rationality and were on the brink of insanity finally regained their senses. No one knew who shouted first, but the other undyings that seemed to have woken up from a dream all turned to look around, after which their bodies shook violently as they roared again. Damn it, in such a short time, half of the primordial era treasure body remains have disappeared. There are more than 70 corpses just now. This is definitely not the work of the lion old monster. Faced with the crazy pursuit of more than a dozen immortals of the same level, he had no chance to take action at all. We've all been deceived. The lion old monster is obviously the scapegoat. At the same time, he attracted our attention, and the hidden mastermind took the opportunity to take action. Roar. Who is it? Who is it? I'm going to tear him apart. Come out now. We were too careless. More than a dozen immortals were fooled by someone right under our noses. How can we endure this? Old Lion is really a piece of sh*t. He's really a piece of sh*t. Only you know the truth. Why didn't you tell us the truth when you knew we were fooled? It's all because of you. As these roars rang out, the group of Immortal Realm old monsters immediately stopped their pursuit and spread out their divine sense at the first possible moment, constantly sweeping the surrounding void to investigate, meticulously not letting go of any trace of what was going on. From the beginning to the end, I'm the most wronged victim, okay? Far away in the void ahead, the lion-nosed old monster, who had been so tired that he was panting, could finally stop and take a breath. He muttered to himself with an inexplicable look of grief and indignation on his face. A group of shameless old men. How dare they blame me? How immoral, walala, wha. Just as the 10 or so immortal old monsters from the various clans of the second universe were suddenly enlightened, they spread out their divine sense and searched the entire void crazily. At this time, the clear sound of chains rattling suddenly sounded without warning at this time. Along with the familiar sound of chains rattling, from the direction of the entrance passage of the mysterious ancient world fragment, a huge bronze cauldron, which was not weaker than any of the superstars, was rapidly approaching. The netherworld cauldron, which came from the first universe, finally rushed into the collapsed ancient world, bringing with it endless ferocious flames. It completely descended. Chapter 4164. Walala, boom, rumble, the netherworld furnace descended, and as soon as it arrived, it was like the end of the world. The 20,000 rune chains outside the walls of the cauldron waved endlessly, and some entangled the remains of the primordial creatures in the void, directly taking them away and throwing them into the internal space of the netherworld furnace. And some rune chains launched an attack, like a giant python in the starry sky, lashing out at the battleships of the vanguard explorers of the various races in the second universe, causing these battleships to explode in an instant, turning into fireballs, illuminating the void. All of this happened too quickly, and the change was shocking. In the blink of an eye, the netherworld furnace had cleared a large area of the void, destroying at least thousands of battleships of the various races in the second universe. As for the remains of the primordial creatures that were taken into the netherworld furnace, there were even more, tens of thousands of them. Obviously, destroying these battleships was just a matter of convenience. The netherworld furnace's main purpose was to collect the remains of the primordial creatures in the void. The moment Xian looked back, he happened to see the remains of 2 primordial creatures being collected by the netherworld furnace without any suspense, disappearing in the blink of an eye. His pupils shrank in an instant. Although he had collected more than 10,000 corpses of the desolation creatures, and more than 300 of them were at the desolation level. Although there were still many corpses left in this void, there were only a few at the desolation level. There were only 30 of them. In fact, Xianxia had already decided to give up on the last 30 or so corpses of the primordial era supreme beings. Even so, when he saw the netherworld furnace plundering the corpses of various levels so quickly and recklessly, he still felt incomparably indignant and suffocated. The key was that not only was the other party's efficiency extremely high, but its posture was also a little too domineering. Compared to Yixian, who took more than 2 days to collect more than 10,000 primordial creatures' remains. Forget it, compared to the netherworld furnace, only people would be angered to death. Damn it, you dare to be more monstrous than this Star Master. One day, I will take you. Yixian glared fiercely at the netherworld cauldron. Without further delay, his figure flashed, and he directly rushed toward the silver dragon on the right side of the void. At the same time, the lion-nosed old monster and more than 10 other undying old monsters of the second universe, who had been searching frantically in the void, were all roaring in fear. Damn it, are you all stupid? Avoid it, quickly avoid it. Rice bucket. A bunch of rice buckets. He clearly saw the furnace rushing over, but he actually stayed in the same place and waited for death. What a pity for the remains of those treasure bodies. I've worked hard for nearly 3 days and finally collected some corpses below the immortal rank. Now I've lost at least 1/10 of them. Evacuate immediately. Take the remains of the treasure body that have been stored in the battleship and rush out. Return to the clan and we will discuss further. At this moment, these 10 undying old monsters' hearts were bleeding. In the past 3 days, even though they had been thinking of a way to collect the remains of the immortal rank and above treasure bodies, the clan fleets they had brought had been collecting the remains of the Star Lord, Domain Lord, and Sector Lord level treasure bodies without stopping for a single moment. There were even some normal immortal rank remains that they would occasionally take action to collect. After successfully collecting them, they would either keep them in their bodies or send them to their battleships for storage. However now, in the blink of an eye, the Netherworld Cauldron had destroyed close to 10,000 battleships. Every race was affected. Every battleship's destruction represented a huge loss that far exceeded the battleship itself. It would be strange if they didn't feel heartache. Very quickly, following the orders of the 10 Undyings, all the space battleships in the surrounding space all changed directions. As they circled around to avoid the Netherworld Cauldron, they all headed back to where they had come from 3 days ago. At this moment, Yixian, who was still using his mental force secret technique to perfectly conceal his aura, finally arrived in front of the silver dragon that was over 100,000 meters long. Looking around, seeing that the 10 undying old monsters weren't paying attention to him, he swiftly made his move. In the blink of an eye, he successfully stored the enormous silver dragon into the Shun-known cauldron within him. After which, Yixian didn't hesitate at all. With a flash of his body, he charged towards the final target, which was the enormous golden dragon that was over 200,000 m long. One had to say, the timely arrival of the Netherworld Cauldron, from a certain point of view, was a huge help to Yixian. Whether it was the silver dragon that had already been captured or the golden dragon that Yixian was about to attack, they were both enormous in size. If the Netherworld Cauldron didn't suddenly arrive and disrupt the situation, attracting the attention of the 10 Undyings, Yixian would definitely be discovered the moment he made his move. Although he wasn't afraid, even if he was discovered, he had been so careful and forcefully held on for nearly 3 days. At the very last moment, he was still exposed, which was quite depressing. At this moment, after successfully storing the silver dragon, Yixian immediately rushed to the golden dragon on the other side of the void. Taking advantage of the fact that no one was paying attention, he suddenly waved his hand. In the blink of an eye, he stored the remains of the 200,000 m long golden dragon into the Shun-known cauldron. This time, his actions were finally discovered. Damn it, that guy hiding in the dark is actually still here. Millions of miles away, an undying old monster from an unknown race in the second universe happened to turn his head and saw the scene of the golden dragon that was lying across the void in front of him mysteriously disappearing. After being slightly stunned, this old guy was so angry that he almost vomited blood. It could be said that he flew into a rage. As he roared, he turned around and shot towards Yixian. Yixian glanced at him coldly. He wasn't interested in paying attention to him at all. The last target, the golden dragon, had already been successfully stored into the internal space of the Shen cauldron. He only stayed behind to watch the show. Taking advantage of the fact that the other party hadn't arrived yet, he immediately turned around and fled. With a flash of his body, he rushed into the depths of this mysterious ancient world. His figure quickly disappeared. Roar, roar. Damn it, he escaped again. Roar. The furious, undying old monster investigated and searched, but in the end, he couldn't find any trace of the other party. After realizing that the other party had successfully escaped far away, he immediately roared again, his voice shaking the void. Walala. Wah. Chapter 4165. The Netherworld stove was so famous that even the undying old monsters didn't dare to face it head-on. Following its unexpected arrival, the Vanguard exploration fleet of the various races of the Second Universe was the first to enter this mysterious, desolate world. After the initial chaos, they quickly restored order and avoided the area where the Dark Stove was wantonly wreaking havoc. They took a detour and rushed to the entrance of this desolate world. Even the lion-nosed old monster and the other undying old monsters couldn't do anything in the face of the Netherworld stove's monstrous flames. They sighed from time to time and followed. This time, they entered this mysterious, desolate world as the vanguard fleet of the various races of the Second Universe to explore. Until now, the final result could be said to be nothing. Instead, they returned with a stomach full of resentment. In addition to the raging aura of the Netherworld stove after its sudden arrival, what made them feel even more resentful was the hidden culprit behind the scenes. He didn't know when that guy had followed them in. He couldn't even be sure if he had come in from the outside world, or if he was a native of this mysterious world, or if he had come here through some other means. But one thing was for sure, and that was he hid in the dark and used some unknown method to completely hide his aura. Then, he quietly took away the remains of the treasured bodies of the desolate creatures. There were even more than 300 primordial expert-level corpses, including the 2 silver dragon and golden dragon that were over 100,000 feet and 200,000 feet respectively. Then, how could he not have collected the corpses of the primordial experts and below? What was more infuriating was that after this guy was exposed, he actually framed the lion-nosed old monster and almost caused them to turn against each other on the spot. Every time they thought of this, the undying old monsters from the various races of the Second Universe felt suffocated. They couldn't breathe and couldn't wait to immediately turn around and continue the search. No matter what, they had to find this abominable guy and torture him to death. But this was obviously extremely irrational. Facing the chaotic and worrisome situation in front of them, they had to immediately return to their races and report everything. They also had to try their best to find 1 or 2 treasures that could take the remains of the desolate creatures' level treasure bodies like the Netherworld stove. Then they could turn around and kill. Otherwise, it was useless to stay here. Not to mention that all the remains of the treasure bodies in the outer area would soon be taken away by the Netherworld stove. Even without this, the remains of the treasure bodies were still lying in the void, and they still couldn't take them away. They could only watch and feel anxious. With this thought in mind, the group of Immortal Realm old monsters arrived at the entrance and waved their hands, giving the order to all the fleets under their command to retreat. Then, without any hesitation, they rushed toward the entrance in front of them one after another. However, a scene that no one had expected occurred. Whether it was the undyings of the various races in the Second Universe or the various fleets behind them, they were all teleported to the void region behind them without exception after entering the entrance in front of them. It It was as if he had run into a reverse spatial tunnel. He was charging forward, but in the end, his vision blurred, and he reappeared not in the domain of Shadow Devil of the Second Universe, but in mysterious primordial heaven and earth behind him. Some of the battleships were even unlucky enough to be transmitted to the area where the Netherworld stove was wreaking havoc. The result was as expected. Before everyone in the battleships could react, the battleships they were in were instantly destroyed by the Netherworld stove. This scene was really too strange, but it was not completely incomprehensible. Obviously, this mysterious entrance to the desolate era, which was 20 to 30 million kilometers wide in the domain of Shadow Devil of the Second Universe, was a one-way starry passage that could only be entered, but not exited. The reason for this must have something to do with this mysterious desolate era. But all this was not important anymore. What was important was that they couldn't get out at all. They couldn't escape even if they wanted to. Damn it, what kind of lousy place is this? Isn't it too overbearing to allow people to enter but not leave? It seems that we can't leave for the time being. We'll think of another way later. After all, the main forces of our races will be here soon. By then, the fleets of the various races will be larger and more prepared. I hope they will bring 1 or 2 heavy artifacts that can collect the remains of the treasure bodies of the powerful figures of the desolate world. Come here, treasure. We can't leave anyway. Why don't we go back? There's no need to waste time on the Netherworld stove. It will only increase the casualties. I think the evil mastermind must have thought the same. He should have left and gone deeper. Let's go after him right away. All battleships, turn around immediately. Let's go. Hong, long, long. Following the orders of the undying old monsters, the fleets of various races that had just gathered started to turn around. Then, they started to move at full speed and gathered into an enormous fleet of more than 3 million starships of various types. After bypassing the area where the Netherworld stove was raging in front of them, from the edge of one side, they sailed into the depths of the void of this mysterious, desolate world. They gradually moved further and further away and disappeared. Half a day later, the remains of the treasure bodies of the desolate creatures in the outer area of the void had basically been collected. The Netherworld stove also turned into a ray of light and shot further ahead. What was left in the void was only the wreckage of a large number of starships that had been destroyed by the Netherworld furnace. They were still burning quietly. The vast void of the universe around them was so silent that it was terrifying. Not long after, the second batch of main forces from the various races of the Second Universe arrived one after another. After seeing the tragic scene in the outer area and the empty void in front of them, the main forces from the various races of the Second Universe did not stay for long. They had all arrived at the same time. They all rushed to the depths of the front. Following that, this area was unusually quiet for a few days. However, this rare silence was quickly broken again. The large fleets from the races of the First Universe and the human race of the Third Universe, as well as the Senate of the Wan Luo Federation, arrived one after another. They rushed into this mysterious, desolate world from the entrance of the passage outside. These top races and forces from the other 2 main planes of the starry sky did not hesitate at all. After a brief investigation, they also rushed to the deeper area ahead. Chapter 4166. In a flash, 10 days had passed in the blink of an eye. 10 days ago, Xianxia was at the periphery of this mysterious, desolate world. After absorbing the last target, which was the remains of the golden dragon, which was more than 200,000 feet in size, into his body, he immediately left, heading deeper into the void of this mysterious, desolate world without any hesitation. Shooting away. In his opinion, since the void of this mysterious, desolate world was filled with so many remains of the desolate world's treasure bodies, then in the deeper hinterland and other areas further ahead, the treasure body resources that could be seen everywhere in the void must be even more amazing. There is even a high chance that there would be other opportunities and fortunes. In short, even he, like all the other experts who had entered the desolate world, was certain that this exploration of the otherworldly space would definitely be an amazing journey of harvest. However, reality and ideals often ran counter to one's wishes. Reality and ideals often ran counter to one's wishes. For an entire 10 days, Yi Xian had maintained a speed that was close to the limit. He had determined a direction and flew through the air at an extremely fast speed. In the end, he even took out the Void Hole shuttle, and his speed instantly increased by several times. But up until now, he still hadn't gained anything. After leaving the periphery of the desolate world, in the void of the universe, not only did he not see any remains of the desolate world's treasure bodies, even a slightly complete star was rarely seen. As for the life planets, that was even more impossible. Along the way, although there were indeed stars of various sizes scattered in the void of the universe like a normal universe plane, these stars were all damaged without exception. Some had even completely collapsed into a pile of different sizes. The star fragments were gone, just like that, floating in the void, exuding a strong aura of destruction. These stars were most likely destroyed in the desolate world's unparalleled battle that had destroyed the entire desolate world. It was also possible that after that, when this corner of the desolate world was drifting in the endless void, it was due to some unforeseen events such as void turbulence, star field collision, and so on. Destroy. However, to Yi Xian, none of this was important. His greatest wish right now was to be able to see the endless remains of the primordial life form treasure in a certain part of the universe in front of him, or a ball of life. Even if the creatures living on this planet were all savage beasts who had yet to develop intelligence, it would be fine. At the very least, he wouldn't be as lost and disappointed as he was now. If he were to know that before he entered this mysterious, desolate world, apart from the vanguard exploration fleet of the various races of the second universe who were lingering at the edge of the previous periphery and trying to collect the remains of the treasure body, there were no other survivors. Even earlier, the first to enter this place was actually a small fleet of more than 100 battleships from the Yin Devil clan, as well as the former clan leader of the Yin Devil clan, the old monster who is now a sector lord, Yin Emperor. The unease and apprehension in Yi Xian's heart was probably even more intense. Yin Emperor and the small fleet commanded by Yin 7 clearly didn't linger around the periphery of the vast amount of remains of the primordial life forms. They had undoubtedly taken the lead and entered the depths of the primordial world even earlier than the rest. With Yi Xian's speed, he should have caught up to them long ago. But in reality, he had traveled for an entire 10 days, and apart from the occasional broken star in the void, he hadn't encountered anything else. This matter was very strange, but it could also be because this mysterious desolate world was too vast. Yin Emperor and the small fleet of the Yin Devil clan were moving in a different direction from Yi Xian, and they had unknowingly missed each other. But no matter what, if Yi Xian knew about this matter, he would more or less be a little vigilant. But now his entire mind was troubled by the seemingly endless monotonous scene in front of him. His mind was in turmoil, and he didn't have the mind to think about anything else. This kind of extremely boring journey in the void continued. In the blink of an eye, another month passed. When Yi Xian's patience was about to be completely exhausted, the angry roar of a vicious beast finally came from the void of the universe in front of him. This vicious beast's angry roar entered Yi Xian's ears, and to him, it was no different from the sound of nature. No, it was even more pleasing to the ear than the sound of nature. It almost instantly revived him on the spot, and his dispirited spirit was instantly refreshed. Without any hesitation, he immediately activated the void-shattering shuttle and followed the direction of the vicious beast's roar. The void-shattering shuttle shot in the direction of the vicious beast's angry roar at an extremely fast speed. As he got closer and closer, the movement in the void in front of him became clearer and clearer. In addition to the occasional vicious beast's roar, there were clearly some booming sounds. Listening to the sound, it should be caused by the attack of a magical weapon or the bombardment of a ship's cannon. Obviously, there was a fierce battle going on in the distant void in front of him. The two sides of the fierce battle, one side was an unknown number of vicious beasts in the starry sky, and the other side, since they could use magical weapons to attack or drive warships to bombard, Even if they weren't humans, at least they were a high-level life form with extremely high intelligence. Furthermore, considering that this world originated from the distant and mysterious primordial age, it was basically impossible for there to be scientific and technological forces that only existed in the present age. Therefore, more than 80% of the violent explosions that came from the front should be caused by the release of a magical weapon. In other words, more than a month after entering this mysterious, desolate world, in a distant void in front of him, there finally appeared indigenous creatures who were suspected to be survivors of the desolate era. Moreover, their cultivation and strength seemed to be quite good, and their numbers were definitely not small. Thinking of this, Xian suddenly became more excited. After more than a month of hard work, he finally found someone he could inquire about. Regardless of whether the other party was a survivor of the primordial era or not, his identity as a native was definitely undeniable. Since he was a native, he must have some understanding of this world. This was of great significance to Xian. At the very least, this kind of aimless, lost, and boring journey through the stars should be coming to an end. With this kind of excitement, Xian steered the void-shattering shuttle at top speed for half a day. In the distance of the void, where the explosions and the roars of the vicious beasts came from, a rather dim light finally appeared. This gloomy light was like a membrane. Looking through it, one's field of vision was blurry, as if they were gazing into another world. Chapter 41:67. Whoosh! With a faint sound of breaking through the air, the void-shattering shuttle, which had reached its maximum speed, rushed out of the huge gray light screen in front of it. In the blink of an eye, it had arrived at another part of the universe outside the light screen. This place was indeed like another world. Even the light was much brighter in an instant. Previously, Xian had traveled all the way here. In the mysterious and ancient world behind the gray light screen, all the stars were dilapidated. There was not a single star that was still emitting light. Naturally, the light was dim, and the new world in front of him was basically not much different from the three main starry skies that Xian had come into contact with before. There were all kinds of stars and stars. It was just that the aura of this world was clearly very old, revealing a strong sense of desolation. It wasn't until the void-shattering shuttle rushed out of that gigantic gray light screen and entered this new world that was filled with a dense and ancient aura that he suddenly realized that before entering, he had actually forgotten to activate the concealment formation of the void-shattering shuttle. The concealment array of the void-shattering shuttle had always been active. However, as Xian traveled alone in the dark and desolate world behind the screen of light, he didn't encounter a single life planet for a long time. As he gradually became impatient, he closed the concealment array of the void-shattering shuttle. Because of this, the void-shattering shuttle, which was originally in a concealed state, revealed itself. In the subsequent space travel, if a life form appeared in a certain part of the universe, even if he did not detect the existence of the other party, it was very likely that the other party would take the initiative to approach the void-shattering shuttle after discovering it. But now, the serious consequences of this small oversight were obviously something that Xian did not expect before this. In the void about 1,000,000 miles in front of him, there was a great battle in space. The commotion that Xian heard from behind the gray light screen happened here and was transmitted through the huge gray light screen. The fact that the commotion of the great battle could be transmitted to such a distant part of the universe showed that the scale and intensity of this space battle was very shocking. However, it took some time for Xian to rush over. Furthermore, no one knew exactly when this interstellar battle had started. Therefore, at this moment, this astonishing interstellar battle was about to end. It had entered its final stages. As for the two sides of the battle, it was just as Xian had guessed. One side was the ferocious beasts of the stars, and the other side was the humans. To be more precise, it should be the survivors of the primordial era. In this battle, the side of the astral beasts had clearly lost. At this time, in the void nearly 100 miles away, the remains of astral beasts of all sizes could be seen everywhere. All of them were damaged, and a thick smell of blood floated in the starry sky. Xian was nearly 100 miles away, and he was still in the void-shattering shuttle. Everyone inside could clearly smell it. With a casual glance, he roughly determined that there were at least tens of thousands of ferocious starry sky corpses in the void. After all, the ferocious starry sky corpses that had been killed first had most likely been taken into storage treasures by the victorious party. This was obviously a large-scale interstellar hunting operation. Tens of thousands of astral beasts were hunted on a large scale, and the survivors of the primordial era on the victorious side were the hunters of the hunt. To be able to carry out such a large-scale interstellar hunting operation, and to end it successfully in the end, it was obvious that the number of survivors of the primordial era on the hunter's side was definitely not too small. According to Xian's estimation, at least a dozen large tribes of survivors of the primordial era participated in this large-scale interstellar hunting operation. Because in the hunting void, nearly 1,000,000 miles away, a large number of survivors of the primordial era gathered around the central region where countless remains of astral beasts were lying across. It could be seen that they had roughly formed a dozen distinct groups. He didn't know much about these survivors of the primordial era and their various situations, so he referred to them as tribes for the time being. These dozen tribes, each tribe had more than 100,000 survivors of the primordial era. In other words, the total number of survivors of the primordial era who participated in this large-scale interstellar hunting operation in the entire void was more than 1,000,000. Moreover, these more than 1,000,000 survivors of the primordial era who belonged to more than a dozen large tribes were clearly all experts of the starry sky. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stay in the void of the universe with their physical bodies. More than 1,000,000 experts of the starry sky, hunting less than 100,000 astral beasts in the void, as long as the disparity in strength between the two sides wasn't too great, then the final result of the battle would belong to the side with more people, obviously without any suspense. On the side of the tens of thousands of astral beasts that were almost completely wiped out, the strongest experts that Xian sensed were only at the sector lord level, and there were only 6 of them. 4 of them had already fallen, and only 2 of them were still leading 2 small groups of astral beasts, struggling bitterly. As for the more than 1,000,000 survivors of the primordial era who gathered around the tens of thousands of astral beasts and the remains of the astral beasts, in terms of strength, there wasn't even a single universe-level existence, not to mention the undying old monsters. It was completely impossible, otherwise this battle would have ended from the beginning. How could it have lasted for so long? Among the more than 1,000,000 survivors of the primordial era, the strongest one was also at the sector lord level. But there were 2 more of them than the astral beasts, a total of 8 sector lord level existences. The rest of the survivors of the primordial era had different strengths, but they were basically at the 8th realm of the starry sky, which was the black hole realm and above. Otherwise, they were basically not qualified to participate in such a large-scale interstellar battle, because the scale of this interstellar space hunt was too large, and the battle wasn't completely over yet, and because the other tribes of the primordial era who were gathered in other directions were further away from the huge light screen that Xian had rushed out from. Of course, the most important thing was that Xian's space-shattering shuttle wasn't very big, only about 300 meters long, which was the captain of the shuttle. And when he rushed out of the huge light screen, it only caused a faint sound of breaking through the air, but didn't cause too much of a commotion. All these factors added together led to the fact that the number of survivors of the primordial era who had rushed out of the huge light screen at the first moment was actually not many. It was just a small group of people from a large tribe closest to the huge light screen, about 1,000 people, definitely not more than 2,000. Chapter 4168. Seeing the void-shattering shuttle suddenly rushing out of a huge dark light screen, these over 1,000 people who were originally heading in this direction to collect the remains of a relatively large ferocious star beast, after being stunned for a moment, they quickly cried out involuntarily one after another. Look, from the abyss of sin ahead, a monster rushed out. What monster? It's obviously a big insect. It can grow to such a size, so it shouldn't be too weak. Everyone, be careful. Strange, why can't I sense any aura of cultivation in this big insect? There's not even a bit of ferocious aura. It seems to be different from ordinary insects. That's why it's a monster. Although I can't sense any aura of cultivation, judging from the luster of its shell, it must be extremely hard. This insect is not easy to deal with. Get into formation immediately. Get into formation, surround and kill this strange insect from the abyss of sin. These words, word by word, were all clearly heard by Yixian. In an instant, his face turned green, and there was a hint of resentment in his eyes. Uncultured, how terrible! This group of survivors of the primordial era had obviously never seen a starry sky battleship. This was normal. There was no technological power in the primordial era at all, and this mysterious primordial era, although it had always existed, was only a fragment of the primordial era. After it was shattered in the unparalleled battle of the primordial era, it had been in exile. Being exiled in the boundless void was no different from being completely sealed off. Therefore, the survivors of the primordial era who lived in this broken world naturally could not come into contact with the outside world, so it was impossible for them to develop technological power. Under such circumstances, it was inevitable that they suddenly saw the void-breaking shuttle and subconsciously judged it to be a monster insect from its appearance. With the exclamations, these survivors of the primordial era quickly dispersed, vaguely forming a battle formation, and quickly surrounded the void-breaking shuttle. In fact, when they exclaimed, many of the survivors of the primordial era in the void not far behind them were alarmed and turned their heads to look. However, when they saw that the existence that had rushed out of the so-called abyss of sin was merely a strange insect that was less than 300 meters long, and there was already a group of more than 1,000 people from their own camp that had gone forward to form a battle formation and were about to begin the hunt. Therefore, the other survivors of the primordial era who were alarmed obviously did not take this matter to heart. Soon, they turned their heads and put their attention back to the end of the starry sky hunt in front of them. It was obvious that the 1,000-plus survivors of the primordial era that were charging towards the void-shattering shuttle in a battle formation weren't a threat to Yixian at all. Their cultivation strength was basically around the void realm and Genesis realm, and there was not even a single one of them. The last 3 or 4 people were only in the 14th realm, which was the early or middle stage of the cosmic light realm. If Yixian wanted to, with just a raise of his hand, he would be able to easily suppress the 1,000 or so survivors of the primordial era that were charging forward and trying to surround and kill him. But he obviously would not do so. The reason why the other party rushed over so aggressively was just because of a misunderstanding. Yixian was a newcomer. On the one hand, he did not intend to make too many enemies, and on the other hand, he wanted to inquire about some information through these survivors of the primordial era. Besides, he had been flying alone in the dark void behind the huge light curtain for so long. He hadn't seen a living person for nearly 2 months. Now that he finally saw one, let alone a human, even if it was just an ugly space beast, he would still be able to see it. Now that he had finally seen one, not to mention that the other party was a human, even if it was just an ugly space beast. Yixian would feel that the other party was very friendly. With that thought, his figure flickered and directly swept out of the space-breaking shuttle, appearing in the void outside in the blink of an eye. Then, with a wave of his hand, he immediately kept the space-breaking shuttle in the undying world in his body. He did not want to leave it outside and be mistaken as a strange big bug and attacked by these people. This is SSS, Mahayana realm. Oh no, something's wrong. That strange bug actually has a master, and it is actually the mount of a Mahayana realm old monster. This is bad. Seeing Yixian suddenly appear and put away the void-shattering shuttle with a wave of his hand, the 1,000 or so survivors of the primordial era that had already formed a battle formation were first stunned. Then their bodies abruptly stopped at the same time. Their expressions changed as they cried out in alarm. It was obvious that they were frightened by the universe-grade aura emanating from Yixian's body. Furthermore, they were quite frightened. At this moment, there were soft exclamations, and many of them were even trembling. The so-called Mahayana realm obviously referred to the universe grade. However, The latter was the name of the three main planes of the starry sky, while this was a fragment of the primordial era that was completely sealed off. Naturally, the name of the cultivators' realm could not be the same as that of the three main planes of the starry sky. This was just a difference in the name, so Xian did not bother to pay attention to it at all. When he saw that these people had all stopped in the void hundreds of thousands of miles away and were staring at him in horror, he could not help but smile bitterly and shake his head. Then he directly cupped his fists and bowed slightly. He said loudly, "Fellow cultivators, this is my first time here and I don't know the way. May I know the name of this star domain?" The reason Xian claimed that his surname was Xiao and that he had even thought of a single name, Feng, was because he had thought about it. Although he was the first powerhouse of the current era to rush through the huge light screen and enter this strange corner of the primordial era, it would not be long before the fleets of the various races of the second universe would arrive here one after another. After the news spread, the fleets of the human race, the myriad Luo Federation, and the other large forces and starry sky powerhouses from the first universe and the third universe would all be the same. Xian did not want to expose his whereabouts, so he naturally could not use his real identity to announce his name. Xiao Feng was just an alias that he casually came up with. At this moment, Xian would never have imagined that in the near future, the alias Xiao Feng that he casually came up with would explode like thunder in this corner of the primordial era and resound through the endless void. It had even surpassed that of the 7 unparalleled evildoers of the current era's 3 great geniuses. The sensation that the starry sky, main plane, had caused. Chapter 4169. Kill you? Why should I kill you? Hearing the other party's words, Xian was immediately angered to the point of laughter. He suddenly realized that there was a faint sense of servility in the bones of these ancient survivors, or rather, it was a kind of bone-deep depression. However, when he thought about it, the universe they lived in was merely a fragment of the primordial world. The source of their bloodline was gone, so it was inevitable that they would become like this due to hesitation and confusion. When he thought of this, Xian couldn't help but feel a trace of pity for these primordial survivors. In truth, they should be of the same bloodline as the human race of the 3 main planes of stars. However, due to the different environments they lived in, they had completely different reactions to each other. It had to be said that this was truly a matter of emotion. Xian sighed inwardly and immediately said, "I've already said that I've only just arrived here and don't know much about this star field, so I'd like to inquire about some information from you." That's great. Senior, the mulberry star where our 12 tribes live is nearby. It's not very far away. Yes. If you don't mind, I hope you can visit our mulberry star. I'll naturally report everything about this star field to you later. Seeing that Xian didn't seem to be lying, the most important thing was that he didn't feel the slightest bit of anger. Moreover, as a supreme expert of the Mayana realm, his attitude was actually so easygoing. It was truly pleasantly surprised and flattering. As a result, while they were excited, the strongest few cosmic light realm experts among the 1,000-plus survivors of the primordial era quickly took a step forward, cupped their hands, and invited Xian with hope. Xian nodded and immediately agreed. "That's fine. I've only just arrived here, so I don't have a place to stay. What's wrong with staying on Mulberry Star for a while?" "Senior, please. Our tribe's mission has already been completed. We'll leave some of our tribesmen behind to collect the remains of this ferocious beast before we can return to the tribe." As he spoke, the strongest among them, a middle-aged man who had reached the 7th level of the cosmic light realm, seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He quickly changed the topic and said, "Oh right, Senior, the 1,000 over of us belong to the Pingshan village under the jurisdiction of the Hongtian tribe. I'm the leader of the village. It's Xianxia." Previously, Xian had heard him mention that there were a total of 12 large tribes on Mulberry G Star. Presumably, this Hongtian tribe was one of them. Under the Hongtian tribe, there were probably quite a number of mountain strongholds. The 1,000 over people in front of him belonged to a small mountain stronghold called the Flat Mountain Stronghold. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Xian did not say much and immediately nodded. "If that's the case, Senior, please board the Luan carriage. This junior will immediately welcome senior into the mountain-raising stronghold. I will definitely treat senior well." Seeing that Yixian was so agreeable, the self-proclaimed leader of Pingyang Mountain was obviously very happy. As he spoke, he waved his hand and took out a Luan carriage magic treasure, respectfully inviting Yixian to board. It could be seen that this guy clearly had some selfish motives. It seemed that he did not want Yixian's existence to be known by the other small mountain strongholds or large tribes. Therefore, he wanted to bring him away from this area as soon as possible. The reason for this might be related to Yixian's cultivation, but all this was not important. Yixian could not be bothered with it. After nodding his head, he leaped and entered the Luan carriage magic treasure. There were no elements of technological power in this world. The survivors of the primordial era did not even recognize the Starry Sky battleships. Their means of transportation were basically all Luan carriages, flying boats, and other types of flying magic treasures. Although it was a bit strange, Yixian was relieved when he thought that the human cultivator camp in the third universe was also like this. He did not feel that there was anything wrong with it. Seeing Yixian enter the Luan carriage, Pingyang Mountain was overjoyed. He quickly boarded the Luan carriage with several other cosmic light realm elders. Then, he said a few words to the mountain strongholds who stayed to collect the remains of the huge beast. Then, he channeled the power in his body and drove the Luan carriage magic treasure to one side. The universe void blasted away. According to Ping Yangshan's introduction, although the mulberry tree star where they lived wasn't far from here, it wasn't close either. With his cosmic light realm cultivation, he would need around 3 days to reach here if he drove the Luan chariot with all his strength. And in this vast galaxy void within a radius of 100 million miles, Mulberry G-Star was the only life planet where the survivors of the primordial era lived. Of course, in this area, there were some other life planets. Although there were no survivors of the primordial era living on them, there were all kinds of ferocious star beasts. And these ferocious star beasts were the food of the survivors of the primordial era on Mulberry G-Star, as well as the only flesh and blood resource to improve their cultivation strength. As for the large-scale Starry Sky hunt that Yixian had just seen for the survivors of the primordial era on Mulberry G-Star, it was not something that happened often. In this Starry Sky hunt, all 12 major tribes on Mulberry G-Star participated. Although not all of their clansmen were involved, such a scale basically only happened once or twice a year. Mulberry G-Star was the only life planet where the survivors of the primordial era lived within a radius of 100 million miles of the universe void. The total number of survivors of the primordial era in this planet was very shocking. Nearly half of the surface area of Mulberry G-Star was a vast ocean, and the other half of the land area was divided into more than a dozen giant continents by the vast ocean. Among these continents, except for a few that were too barren and thus had very few survivors of the primordial era. Among these dozen continents, there were 12 that belonged to the 12 major tribes of Mulberry G-Star. Every major tribe had more than 10 million people. Hong Tian tribe was one of them. Within Hong Tian tribe, there were close to 1,000 strongholds of various sizes. A small stronghold only had a few thousand people, while a large stronghold had tens of thousands of people or even hundreds of thousands of people. The Flat Mountain stronghold, led by Ping Yangshan, was only considered average among the thousands of strongholds in Hong Tian tribe. All the strongholds added up to just a little over 10,000 people. However, among these 10,000 people, there were close to 40% old, young, women, and children. There were only about 6,000 true cultivators. As the stronghold leader of Flat Mountain Stronghold, Ping Yangshan had the cultivation of a level 7 cosmic ray realm martial artist. However, he was not the strongest person in Flat Mountain Stronghold. In Flat Mountain Stronghold, there was also an elder whose cultivation had reached the universe realm. Chapter 4170. This planet was not very big, but it was not small either. It was about the same size as the Sky River Star. However, compared to the modern three-dimensional architecture of the Sky River Star, the Mulberry Star, which had no technological elements, was much more backward in terms of architectural style. After entering the atmosphere, Xian saw that on the huge continents, there were basically villages of various sizes. They were all in the simplest form of settlement. There were no tall buildings at all, not to mention those floating platforms in the air or above the sea. However, the total population of the 12 tribes of the Desolation era on the Mulberry Star was less than 200 million. Such a huge planet with life, with only 200 million high-level life forms, it was far from crowded. It could even be said that the population density was very low. Under such circumstances, there was really no need for them to build castles in the air and cities on the water. The Hongtian tribe was located in the southeast of the Mulberry Star. The continent that this tribe occupied was called the Hongtian continent. The flat mountain village was located in the northwest of the Hongtian continent. It was a relatively remote place. The stronghold was located in a warm valley surrounded by huge mountains on 3 sides. On the other side of the valley was a vast expanse of fertile plains. The geographical location was quite good. In the valley, many 3-story brick houses rose from the ground and were distributed according to the terrain. In addition, on the mountain cliffs that surrounded the valley on 3 sides, there were also cave entrances. Obviously, these 3 giant mountain cliffs were also used by the mountain leveling village, and they were carved into cave dwellings. The number of cave dwellings was very high. There were quite a few of them. Soon, the Luan carriage descended and landed in the valley. After Xian got off the Luan carriage, he immediately looked toward the center of the valley. Just now, when he was in the air, he had seen the situation in the entire valley. Everything else was fine, as it belonged to a group of mountain strongholds. Only in the center of the valley was an item that appeared very strange, attracting Xian's interest. This strange object was a big cauldron. Of course, it could not be compared to the Shinnong cauldron and the Netherworld cauldron. It was not at the same level at all. However, this big cauldron was obviously a magic treasure. It was just that its grade was not very high. According to Xian's estimation, it was between the best magic treasure and the legendary magic treasure. However, this big cauldron was obviously very old. Its size was more than 1,000 meters wide. It was much bigger than the houses in the surrounding valley. Therefore, it was very eye-catching, which attracted Xian's attention. Senior, this time, our flat mountain village has reaped a great harvest from the Starry Sky Hunt. We have obtained more than 500 sets of various ferocious beast remains. For the people in the village, this is definitely a rare harvest. Seeing Xian turn his head to look at the big black cauldron in the center of the valley, Flat Mountain Village's village leader Ping Yangshan immediately walked over and said politely, "If these ferocious beast remains are used as food, it doesn't matter if they are kept for a long time. However, if they're used to refine flesh and blood medicine, it's rare for us to have such a great harvest." Before the hunt began, several of the village's higher-ups had already discussed and agreed that apart from a portion of the ferocious beast remains that are not suitable for refining medicine, we will keep them as food for a period of time. The rest of the ferocious beast remains will immediately be thrown into the cauldron. In the cauldron, I'm going to boil the flesh medicine. This matter will begin immediately. In approximately 3 days, this cauldron of great medicine will be completed. With Senior's cultivation and strength, you naturally won't be able to use it, but it's not impossible to taste it as a delicious soup. Refining the ferocious beast, Xian's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. His interest was piqued immediately. His cultivation base was currently at the Universe 1 grade, which he had achieved after successfully breaking through after consuming a vial of level 19 fluid. After reaching the Great Circle of level 9, Xian could still consume a vial of level 20 fluid, which would allow him to break through to the immortal grade. Of course, he hadn't concocted the level 20 fluid yet, but he had already deduced the formula, so it wouldn't be a problem to successfully concoct it. However, based on Xian's experience and deductions, as well as the results of the devouring system in his body, all indicated that the level 20 fluid was already the limit of the gene cultivation fluid. In other words, the level 20 fluid would be the end of the road for the evolution of the physical body using the gene cultivation fluid. This kind of magical medicinal fluid created by the elements of science and technology could only push the evolution of the human life form to the immortal grade. After the immortal grade, or in other words, the level 21 fluid after the level 20 fluid, it wasn't impossible to successfully concoct the gene cultivation fluid. It just didn't need to be concocted using the simple concoction method of the past. Instead, it had to be concocted using a method similar to the alchemy method of the human race. However, Yixian could roughly understand that this method was to use a cauldron to throw in all sorts of top-notch precious materials and medicines, as well as the flesh and blood of powerful dire beasts, and refine them at the same time. In the end, a medicinal paste or medicinal fluid that contained miraculous effects and huge amounts of energy would be produced. However, he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know anything about it. Although he could slowly experiment and feel his way forward, that would be too time-consuming and laborious. He hadn't expected that this problem would actually be solved in this corner of the broken, desolate ancient realm. The 1,000-meter cauldron in front of him had clearly been placed in the middle of the valley for a very long time. Furthermore, the bottom of the cauldron was clearly a meticulously treated volcanic crater. Obviously, the Mountain Razor village had been using this giant cauldron to draw the underground fire from the volcanic crater to concoct the flesh and blood medicine. Moreover, according to Ping Yangshan, the village leader, this method seemed to be very common among the tribes of the remnants. All the remnants of the desolate ancient realm, from the small villages to the big tribes, concocted the flesh and blood medicine in this way and then swallowed it to improve their strength. It was understandable. After all, after the battle of the desolate ancient realm, this corner of the desolate ancient realm was exiled to the endless void of the universe. They didn't have any contact with the outside world, so they didn't have any technological elements. Even the alchemy method that the human race's cultivation camp had gradually formed after countless years. They didn't know anything about it. However, the method of concocting the flesh and blood medicine that they had was the original ancient system from the desolate ancient realm. It had long been lost in the three main planes of the universe. Chapter 4171. At this moment, he learned that all the survivors of the Desolation Era on the life planets in the Desolation Era, regardless of whether they were from small villages or large tribes, were using the same method to refine the flesh medicine. They obtained the powerful flesh medicine with extraordinary effects and enormous energy. Thus, they could improve their cultivation after taking the medicine. After this, Yixian was immediately invigorated. He had made the right choice this time. He immediately made a decision. When he returned, he would find a way to collect all the different techniques and secret techniques that were in the hands of these small mountain strongholds and the big tribes. Then he would hand them all over to the devouring system in his body to be summarized and summarized. Finally, he would deduce the best way to refine the flesh medicine. As a result, with Yixian's massive amount of top-notch desolate ancient creatures' corpses and even more top-notch treasures, he was very confident that he could refine several types of level 21 or above flesh and blood medicine in a short period of time. At least, he would be able to refine the flesh medicine that corresponded to the last 4 realms of the 5 realms of the immortal realm, the Marquis Immortal Realm, the King Immortal Realm, the Emperor Immortal Realm, and the Emperor Immortal Realm. At this moment, many villagers of the Flat Mountain Village were already busy around the huge cauldron in the middle of the valley. Everyone seemed to be familiar with the process. They each performed their own duties. Some guided the spring water into the cauldron, while others activated the array to guide the earth fire from the crater under the cauldron. They made the earth fire rise and heat up under the cauldron. Some started to throw some pieces of fierce beast flesh into the cauldron one after another. These pieces of fierce beast flesh were all processed. On the open land, near the river on the other side of the valley, a large number of villagers were also busy. This time, the Flat Mountain Village had obtained hundreds of huge pieces of fierce beast flesh. Some of them were thrown into the cauldron without any processing. Some of them were taken from the open land by the river and thrown into the cauldron. Then they were cut into pieces and thrown into the huge cauldron. Everything seemed to be very busy, but it was also very orderly. Yixian looked over from time to time. For a moment, there was a kind of dizzying feeling. The cauldron with a radius of 1,000 meters was not small at all. Just the spring water that was drawn into the cauldron could be considered a large pool. The various heavenly materials and earthly treasures that the villagers threw in one after another could probably be piled into a small mountain. These heavenly materials and earthly treasures should have been collected and stored by the villagers of Flat Mountain Village in the nearby mountains. As for the ferocious beasts, flesh and blood, there were hundreds of them. The largest ones were even 1,000 meters in size. They were cut into pieces of meat of different sizes and thrown into the cauldron. Just this part alone took half a day. When night began to fall, everything was finally completed. At this time, the huge circular cauldron with a radius of 1,000 meters was already about to overflow. Then, a huge and definitely extremely heavy cauldron lid was put on the huge black cauldron by the combined efforts of some of the villagers. The other villagers began to set up some tables and the like on the flat land surrounding the huge black cauldron. At a glance, there was no end to the cauldron. It was obvious that a banquet was about to unfold here. Moreover, this banquet was very likely to last for 3 whole days. It would not end until the meat and medicine in the huge black cauldron was completely refined. When night fell, bonfires were already lit everywhere. A large number of villagers shuttled back and forth, placing all kinds of spiritual fruits, spiritual wine, and some roasted and marinated fierce beast meat on each table. The clan elder with the strongest cultivation in the Flat Mountain stronghold, who had already reached the universe realm, did not appear. However, as the head of the stronghold, the second strongest person in the entire Flat Mountain stronghold, Xianxia, and a few other cosmic realm elders had always been by Yixian's side, occasionally raising their cups to invite him. For the entire Flat Mountain village, a banquet of this scale was obviously not held often. According to Yixian's estimation, Xianxia had said before that large-scale starry sky hunts like this one only happen about twice a year in the entire mulberry tree star. If there were no accidents, a banquet of this scale would only happen about twice a year in the Flat Mountain village. Today's great harvest was a rare and grand festival in their eyes. And Yixian, who had accidentally come here, became the most distinguished guest of this banquet. Soon, the soup in the huge black cauldron finally began to boil as the earth fire slowly increased in temperature. Although there were still 3 full days before this cauldron of flesh medicine was completely refined, the fierce beast meat in the cauldron had clearly been cooked long ago. There were a few small holes on the cauldron beast, from which steam occasionally rose, bringing with it a strong meaty aroma that filled the entire valley. This meaty aroma was very strange. It was clearly mixed with the unique smell of various heavenly materials and earthly treasures that had been thrown into the cauldron. When mixed together, it actually made one's appetite wet. Even Yixian, who was used to eating top-grade fierce beast meat roasted by Shenong's unusual flame, couldn't help but praise in his heart. As expected of an ancient technique that had been passed down since the primordial era. Although he still didn't understand some of the techniques, just this unique aroma that wafted out from the boiling soup was enough to make him look forward to the flesh medicine that would come out of the cauldron in 3 days' time. 3 days' time couldn't be considered long, but it couldn't be considered short either. After Yixian, Xianxia, and the other cosmic light realm elders in the stronghold had a round of drinks, everyone finally became familiar with each other, and their chatterboxes naturally opened up. Very soon, Yixian took this opportunity to ask about some topics related to the primordial era. For example, why the gloomy world that he had previously rushed out of on the void-shattering shuttle was called the Abyss of Sin, and the truth behind the unparalleled battle in the primordial era that had caused the complete collapse of the entire primordial era. What was it, etc.? These topics were what Yixian had been guessing about for a long time, but he had never had a real answer. He only had some hypothetical questions. Taking this opportunity to ask this question, Yixian was originally just casually asking, and didn't have high expectations of being able to obtain detailed information. However, life was always like this. There were some things that When you looked forward to it too much, it would often take a long time to come. When you didn't have high expectations at all, it would suddenly come when you were not mentally prepared, and it would shock you to the core, perhaps. This was the meaning of the saying, "A well-intentioned tree will not succeed, but an unintentional willow will succeed." That's right, for Yi Xian, this time, he had indeed encountered a major surprise that he wasn't mentally prepared for. Because the truth about the unparalleled battle in the primordial era that had destroyed the entire primordial era seemed too mysterious to him. But for these survivors of the primordial era, it was a matter that could be described by word of mouth. Yi Xian had just asked about it, and the several cosmic light realm elders, including Ping Yangshan, had all heard about it. Chapter 4172. From the words of Ping Yangshan and the other universal light realm experts, Yi Xian finally understood the real truth of the battle in the Untainted Land. He had all kinds of conjectures about the battle in the Untainted Land that destroyed the entire Untainted Land, but he had never been able to verify them. Now that Yi Xian had personally heard everything that happened back then from the mouths of the survivors of the primordial era, his mind instantly rumbled as he was completely stunned. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the truth behind that unprecedented battle would actually be so bizarre and bizarre. In the Untainted Land, when a world was just created, there was already a wisp of the Untainted Land's heavenly Tao, which accompanied the creation of the world and enveloped the entire Untainted Land. However, the heavens and earth were heartless, and all living things were nothing but straw dogs. The entire primitive world was like a purgatory of blood and fire. There was slaughter and blood everywhere, and a slightly weaker race would not be able to survive for long at all before being exterminated. Even some of the stronger races had to be vigilant at all times. In order to survive, whether they were willing or not, they had to carry out all kinds of bloody killings from time to time. People were born, grew old, got sick, and died, and the moon was waxing and waning. Wind, rain, thunder, lightning, earth, fire, and heavenly wind. All living things in the world were alternating between life and death, and the cycle of life and death had its own unchanging rules of operation. The heavenly Tao was invisible, but controlled all the rules and Taos. In the Untainted Land, a group of living things who were born at the beginning of the world were blessed by the great luck of the world. Almost from the beginning, they were born with all kinds of heaven-defying talents and mastered all kinds of magical powers that came with their bloodlines. Some of the outstanding ones cultivated the magical powers of their bloodlines to the extreme and finally touched one of the 10,000 Taos of the operation of the heavenly Tao. In the various fields represented by their bloodlines, they could almost master the rules of the world and could be said to be walking the Tao on behalf of the heavens. As the number of living things who were enlightened in the various fields of the rules of the world increased, some of the ancestors of the Untainted Land who were later regarded as evil cultivators, and at the same time were dissatisfied with the Untainted Land that was full of bloody killings everywhere. They conceived a crazy idea. They believed that since the heavenly Tao was formed by the 10,000 laws of Tao that all living things followed, then if some living beings who each controlled one of the laws of Tao were gathered together, why couldn't they create another heavenly Tao? Once this crazy idea was made public, the Untainted Wastelands were shocked. More and more crazy evil cultivators appeared and gathered together. They left their original heaven and earth and struggled to create the second heavenly Tao in the endless void. Just as the evil cultivators were about to fuse and reorganize the laws of heaven and earth that they each controlled, they actually managed to create an artificial heavenly axiom in the form of an infant. The righteous cultivators and the guardians of the righteous cultivators who had traversed space and time to chase after them finally approached with their armies. A battle of the largest scale since the beginning of the world unfolded in an instant. This unprecedented war lasted for 10,000 years. During this time, countless creatures of the Desolation era participated in it. The entire untainted world was affected by the flames of war. There were countless mighty figures and supreme creatures of the Desolation era who participated in it. Even the cruel and ruthless heavenly Tao of the untainted world suddenly descended in the later part of the war. At that time, the artificial heavenly Tao, created by the ancestors of the Desolation era who were known as evil cultivators, which was the infant heavenly Tao, was obviously far from mature. Even so, he still fought with the heavenly Tao of the untainted world several times in the war, and both sides won and lost. In the end, after 10,000 years, this unprecedented war finally came to an end. The result of the war was that both sides suffered great losses, and both sides suffered great casualties. At the last moment, the heavenly Tao of the untainted world and the infant heavenly Tao of the untainted world fought with all their strength. A shocking explosion resounded through the sky. The heavenly Tao of the untainted world was severely injured, and the infant heavenly Tao of the untainted world was beheaded by him. The infant heavenly Tao of the untainted world became a headless infant corpse that contained evil thoughts. In the end, it turned into a fine ray of light and shot away. It went and disappeared. The two supreme experts of the untainted world used their full strength at the end of the war and completely shattered the vast and boundless untainted world into countless fragments of various sizes. Endless turbulence in the void blew in from the cracks in the void of various sizes, destroying countless races. In the end, the shattered untainted world, which was so shattered that even the heavily injured heavenly Tao of the untainted world was unable to reassemble, swept in all directions from then on. The unprecedented war that had lasted for 10,000 years finally came to an end, and the once incomparably glorious untainted world was completely destroyed. To the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era on our mulberry tree star, the once incomparably glorious untainted world is actually not much different from a distant legend. When the final result of the war was mentioned, the few cosmic light realm elders of the mountain-raising stronghold who were sitting around Xian had long since sighed with emotion. Patriarch Xianxia sighed and then continued. In fact, even we don't know where the end of this corner of the untainted world fragment is. It can be seen how vast and boundless the once incomparably glorious untainted world was. Every time I think of the era and world where my ancestors lived, it is truly fascinating, yet also incomparably sad. This corner of the untainted world fragment is actually so vast. Hearing that even Xianxia and the others did not know where the end of this corner of the untainted world fragment was, Xian could not help but frown slightly. He subconsciously asked, could it be that the strongest experts of your mulberry tree star have never gone out and explored the end of this world? Previously, he had heard Xianxia mention that the leaders of the 12 great tribes of this mulberry tree star were all equivalent to the peak of the 9th stage of the realm lord of the current starry sky. Logically speaking, this kind of cultivation was not weak, so it should not be too dangerous to travel through space and explore the end of this world. A dangerous matter. This world is indeed very vast, but in reality, it is not to the extent that after such a long time, no one has yet to discover the end of it. Leader Xianxia took over the conversation and patiently explained to Xian, perhaps on other planets with stronger existences, someone has already discovered this matter, but on our mulberry tree star, it is completely impossible in this world, other than the survivors of the primordial era. There are actually more descendants of the primordial era's ferocious beasts. For example, in the vast territory around our mulberry tree star, there are actually many life planets, but there is only one life sphere, the mulberry tree star, and the people living inside are the survivors of the primordial era. Chapter 4173. Xianxia only gave a few simple explanations, but Xian was already completely enlightened. Obviously, the survivors of the primeval age who lived on the vital planets in this corner of the primeval age didn't have an easy time. They were different from the descendants of the primordial beasts who lived on more planets. The descendants of the primordial beasts had their inheritances in their own bloodlines. These primordial beasts devoured each other to make their own bloodlines purer. They evolved step by step and became stronger. However, not many of the inheritances of the survivors of the primordial era were left after the Great Battle in the primordial era. Even if there were, most of them were incomplete. As such, their path of evolution and strength was destined to be much more difficult than the bloodline descendants of the primordial ferocious beasts who lived in the void of the primordial world fragment. Whether it was the height that they could reach or the speed of evolution, they were far inferior to the descendants of the primordial beasts. In this way, when an extremely powerful ferocious beast, such as the immortal rank, existed in a certain star field, then that star field would become a true forbidden area for all the primordial survivors around it. They would not dare to approach it at all. However, if there was such an extremely powerful ferocious beast in every corner of a planet where the survivors of the primordial era lived, then the planet where a small number of survivors of the primordial era lived would be trapped. This was because no matter which direction they explored in, they would eventually encounter a forbidden area guarded by an immortal-level ferocious beast. Therefore, they could only hide in this corner of the central region and struggle at death's door. They could not get in touch with the outside world or contact other survivors of the primordial era. They could not communicate with each other and try to complete the inheritances left by the bloodline ancestor. In this way, it was equivalent to forming a vicious cycle. The strength of the entire race was always in the slow lane of evolution. There was almost no hope for the future. Xianxia star was obviously like this. Moreover, in this primeval world fragment void that was still unknown to the extent of its vastness, it was very likely that similar life planets with more or less primeval survivors were all in the same situation. They lived in the crevices of the starry skies. It was no wonder that Xian had felt that these survivors of the primordial era were rather servile. Now, it seemed that it was not servility, but a kind of despair that had almost been engraved in their bones, and the inevitable result of being at a loss for the future. The entire mulberry tree star was a lost planet of life. Maybe in this vast space, there would be some highly evolved primordial planets with undying and even officials. However, it was obvious that the 12 tribes of Xianxia star that had never ventured beyond a trillion li of space didn't have such information. Everyone knew, after realizing this, Xian could not help but feel disappointed. He had thought that he would finally be able to figure out the general situation of this fragment of the untainted land, since he had finally found a life planet where the survivors of the primordial age lived. He did not expect that the result would be so embarrassing. None of the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era who lived on this life planet had ventured beyond a trillion li of space. In this space of a trillion li of space, Xianxia star was the only life planet where the survivors of the primordial era lived. Even if he wanted to find another place to inquire, he was destined to have no chance. It seemed that he had to rely on himself in the end. A distance of hundreds of millions of kilometers wasn't considered too far for the current Xian. Right now, he could only hope that after leaving this area, he would be able to encounter a life planet with a powerful ancient remnant overseeing it. Only in this way would he be able to smoothly inquire about this corner of Han. Information related to the general situation of the fragment of the wasteland. As they drank and chatted, Ping Yangshan and the other strongest cosmic light realm experts in the stronghold quickly brought up the situation around the mulberry orchid star, which was located in a radius of 1 trillion kilometers. Just as Xian had guessed, the reason why the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era who lived on this life planet did not know anything about the universe beyond 1 trillion li of space. The reason was that the place where they lived happened to be in the center of several starry, forbidden zones. No matter which direction they headed in, they would eventually reach a forbidden area in the starry sky that was billions of miles in circumference. Even if they used all the power of their clan, they would never be able to cross this forbidden area in the starry sky. The nearest one was more than 40 million li away, and the furthest one was more than 80 million li away. The only thing they had in common was that each of these forbidden zones had 1 to 2 or 3 extremely powerful ferocious beasts guarding them. According to the Starry Sky realm, These extremely powerful, ferocious beasts guarding the surrounding forbidden zones should all be immortal rank existences. Speaking of these extremely powerful immortal realm fierce beasts, Ping Yangshan and the other strongest experts of the village were full of helplessness, because it was their existence that prevented the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era on Xianxia star from leaving. At the same time, it was most likely because of them that they prevented the other survivors of the primordial era from entering the starry space outside. However, apart from feeling helpless about these extremely powerful immortal realm fierce beasts, they also felt a deep sense of powerlessness and fear. Among the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era on Xianxia star, the strongest was only at the perfect level, 9-sector Lord Realm. There is not even a single universe-grade existence. So what could they do in the face of an immortal realm fierce beast that was an entire realm stronger than a universe-grade existence? They could only look at the ocean and sigh. However, this was obviously not a problem for Yixian. Immortal realm fierce beast could not stop him from moving forward. In fact, with his current strength, Yixian could even fight head-on with a marquee-level immortal if he used all his supreme abilities and cultivation base. He could even defeat a marquee-level immortal. Thinking of this, he immediately made a decision. After a short stay on this mulberry tree star, he immediately left. He randomly chose a direction and passed through the so-called forbidden area tens of millions of kilometers away. He walked out of this sealed area that was like a cage in the starry sky and went to a wider area outside to gather information in the starry sky. The only reason he decided to stay on Xianxia star for the time being was because the tens of millions of survivors of the primordial era who lived on this life star had inherited the secret technique of refining the great flesh medicine.